virtual Democratic convention as former First Lady Michelle Obama capped off a night of convention speeches aimed at uniting the party's various factions around the same goal: defeating President Trump in November. Tonight, Democrats will focus on their future leaders, like rising stars in the progressive movement Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, as she's known colloquially, and Stacey Abrams. But we're also going to hear from members of the old guard, including a couple of former presidents, Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton. And closing out night two, an address from the former Second Lady, Jill Biden. Also leading up to the show tonight, we've learned that Democrats plan to showcase yet more support for Biden from two more high-profile figures long associated with the GOP: Cindy McCain, wife of the late Senator John McCain, and Colin Powell, a former Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. And while George W. Bush may be the last Republican president he supported, it's the first ever Democratic convention he's participating in. Once again, it is shaping up to be a politically and technically interesting night in American politics, set to begin in less than an hour. Heading into this week of virtual primetime programming amid the pandemic, perhaps the biggest question continues to be, how's this going to work? And after last night's relatively smooth night, technically, Democrats are going to try something a bit unusual. Instead of one keynote speaker, they're going to feature 17. In fact, you're looking at all of them now. Stacey Abrams is going to kick this off, but it is a slew of rising stars in the party that are going to share one speech. And they're also going to attempt a virtual roll call tonight, taking viewers to all 57 states and territories that have delegates. And we actually expect to hear from Joe Biden a couple of times tonight in semi-spontaneous moments. But the single biggest thing to watch for tonight: does Joe Biden's address mark a turning point for this convention? Because last night focused largely on why viewers should vote against President Trump. Does Jill Biden and her speech transition that message to start focusing this convention more on reasons to vote for Joe Biden? It is a critically important question for the party, as it looks to shore up one of the campaign's biggest weaknesses: enthusiasm for their own candidate. Joining me now from Wilmington, Delaware, is my NBC News colleague, Kristen Welker. And so, Kristen, you know, we asked this question last night. I asked it last night. What would night one feel like? An anti-Trump thing, or a little bit more about making the case for Joe Biden? Boy, last night, obviously, an exclamation point on the anti-Trump messaging, of course, featuring Michelle Obama. Tonight, it looks like we're going to have a lot more anti-Trump as well, when you think of a McCain or a Colin Powell.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Chuck, and I think it's going to be a mix. You are going to have those messages of support from Colin Powell, from Cindy McCain, of course, the widow of the late Senator John McCain, who's going to talk about their unlikely friendship between Senator McCain and Joe Biden when he was in the Senate as well. And that is significant, because this is a clear attempt to reach across the aisle, to try to win over some of those more moderate voters, some of those voters in the suburbs, some of those who voted for Trump in 2016. There's going to be more of a focus on national security tonight, Chuck. There's no doubt about that. That is strategically significant. But I do think that in Dr. Jill Biden, we are going to get the other piece of it, which is going to be the case for Joe Biden. This is his closest confidant. She's someone who has been by his side for more than 43 years. The two of them have been married, and of course they have endured a lot together, including the loss of Joe Biden's son, Beau. And so she is going to speak to the strength of his character, and she's going to do it at this high school behind me, Chuck. This is where she taught in the 1990s, and she's going to really focus on leadership as it relates to education, particularly against the backdrop of the age of COVID. She's going to talk about the leadership that is needed to get kids back to the classroom safely, and she will argue that her husband is the right person to do that. And she's going to speak in deeply personal terms, Chuck, as well. She is going to talk about her husband as someone who has experienced deep loss, the loss of not only one child, but two, right, as well as his first wife. And so she'll talk about the resilience that comes with that. She's going to talk about, I am told, Joe Biden, the husband, the father, and the man. And so I think you are going to get both pieces of those puzzles tonight. But former President Bill Clinton certainly is going to give yet another sharp rebuke of President Trump, Chuck.
And very quickly, Kristen, do we expect, do we expect, how much do we expect to see Joe Biden tonight? I know that we had a little cameo from him last night. He does officially get the nomination tonight. He will accept it later. We know that's Thursday. But, you know, in past conventions, the nominee does the thank you delegates. I got to think we're probably going to get something like that.
I think we'll get something like that. And as you point out, Chuck, we saw him last night. He had that town hall. So I think we can expect to see him at some point tonight as well. And again, this is a convention unlike any other because it is virtual, but because of that reason that you just talked about, the fact that Joe Biden, and we expect Senator Kamala Harris as well, are not just going to be there on one night. They're going to be making these appearances throughout the convention. And so we will be anticipating that as we anticipate this speech, the big speech of the night from Dr. Jill Biden, Chuck.
Kristen Walker getting us started in the center of the political universe these days, Wilmington, Delaware. Kristen Walker, thank you. So joining me now is my NBC News colleague,
Chuck.
Casey Hunt. She's also host, of course, of KCDC Sundays on MSNBC. David Plouffe, former campaign manager for Barack Obama's successful 2008 candidacy. And Daniela Gibbs-Leger. She's the executive vice president at the Center for American Progress. All right, Casey, it's interesting here. Night two. Last night was an anti-Trump night, pure and simple. They made a strong case about whether it was coming from John Kasich, coming from, obviously, Michelle Obama, making the biggest case. But you had that message of set aside your differences. This is too important. Tonight, are we going to get a lot more anti-Trump, or are we going to get some more Joe Biden?
I think what you had to say with Kristen there was right, that the push tonight is going to be more explaining to people why Joe Biden is the right person for this job, the right person to take that mantle against Donald Trump. And, you know, our polling has shown very clearly that people, a lot of people are saying that they're going to vote for Joe Biden simply because he is not Donald Trump. Far more people seem to be saying that than people who are saying that they're voting for Donald Trump simply because he's not Joe Biden. And I think it's inevitable to a certain extent because you're going to hear from Dr. Jill Biden, who is the person who knows Joe Biden better than anyone at this point. She is a true character witness. But I also think it's hard to completely pull them apart because they are essentially making, and Republicans and progressives yesterday at the convention saying, they're making a character argument here. They are saying we are setting our issue differences aside and we are focusing on the character of this man, Joe Biden, and this is why we should pick him to be president of the United States. So I think it's a little bit hard to completely pull it apart, but Democrats know they need to make an affirmative case for Joe Biden here.
Daniela, I'm curious. I want to play a soundbite from John Kasich last night because it's interesting to me. I could tell the soundbite that many progressives quoted from John Kasich was simply, he puts country over party. But I want to play the soundbite that some Republicans kept quoting in making their case of why they're against Donald Trump. Take a listen.
There are Republicans and independents who couldn't imagine crossing over to support a Democrat. They fear Joe may turn sharp left and leave them behind. I don't believe that because I know the measure of the man.
So, Daniela, and right after that, Bernie Sanders is making the case to his supporters, we're winning. We've got this agenda. I mean, have we ripped the tent? Is there a hole in this large tent? What say you?
No, I don't think there's a hole in the tent. The tent is we have to get Donald Trump out of office. Then the tent is holding just fine. I mean, look, all the Republicans who are supporting, a lot of the Republicans who are supporting Joe Biden will acknowledge that there are policy differences. But I think we are at an inflection point in this country where we really have to be concerned about what America will be left if Donald Trump is reelected. Like, it is that stark that it's not hyperbole. So I think it is perfectly fine and okay for John Kasich to say that. And it also is okay and fine for Bernie Sanders to say that Joe Biden will be the most progressive president we've ever had, because he will be. Both things can be true. It's 2020 when things are very, very strange like that.
David Plouffe, I mean, look, I got to think when you're running a general election, this is a good problem to have, right? You got progressives that want to believe you're there for them. You got disaffected Republicans that want to believe you're not going to be rolled. How could that go wrong? What do they have to be careful of here? Because every night this is the second night in a row featuring quite a few Republicans.
Yeah, what's interesting, Chuck, maybe some of the Trump campaign advertising suggesting that, on the one hand, the Trump campaign suggests that Joe Biden is mentally deficient. He'll basically be sitting in the Oval Office just slobbering on himself. On the other hand, he'll be a colossus astride our body politic, right, destroying our country and doing all these progressive things. Maybe he's going to help with turnout amongst progressives. But I think that's what's interesting. Some of what's driving Biden's lead right now is suburban voters, college-educated men, even some exurban voters who think that, Biden's a safe alternative. But he also still needs to generate, particularly with the pandemic and all the challenges around voting, extraordinarily strong turnout and activism. So that is definitely a balance that he has to walk. I think there's a lot of people out there, 52, maybe 54% of the people who are going to vote, who, all things being equal, decided they don't want to rehire Donald Trump. So they're going to be looking from Joe Biden himself and from his surrogates, something they can latch onto that says, okay, this is the guy I can be comfortable with. But that is a balance that they're going to have to walk the rest of this week and the rest of the campaign. And it'll be interesting to see tonight. I agree with you. I think every night, and generally that's what happens. You really take your opponent to the woodshed, the first couple nights. I think Barack Obama's speech, certainly Joe Biden's speech, will be strong critiques against Donald Trump. But you've got to fill in for the country who Joe Biden is, what he wants to do. And again, this is much less about what he's done in the last 40 years and what he's going to do in the next 4.
Casey Hunt, Cindy McCain has tweeted, and she explained what she did here with this video. She said, put this in the tweet, "My husband and Vice President Biden enjoyed a 30-plus year friendship dating back to before their years serving together in the Senate. So I was honored to accept the invitation from the Biden campaign to participate in a video celebrating their relationship." I'm curious, what kind of resonance do you think Cindy McCain might have in Capitol Hill among some Republicans who still long for John McCain?
Well, Chuck, I think most of them have been silenced, frankly. I'm not sure that this will draw them out or not. It's going to be, I think, a really telling and perhaps trying period for some of these Republicans for the next couple of months as this campaign unfolds and President Trump continues to use these tactics to be asked over and over again, are you still with this guy? And, I think Cindy McCain's testimony here to Joe Biden's character says a lot about Joe Biden, says a lot about John McCain, and it also says a lot about the current state of our politics today compared to the way it's been in the past. And obviously, we have seen very partisan, very divided, bitter times in our country. For sure. But in modern times, in the last 30 or so years, we have really deviated from obviously all of the general governing norms that we chronicle about what the president has done, but also in personal terms, the way people relate to each other in the hallways. And, the Republicans that have to get reelected, I mean, they've had to face this decision every day of the Trump administration, me and others with microphones in the hallways, asking them about the latest tweet. But this, I think, is going to be a particularly difficult time for them, Chuck.
Yeah, I think many of them think it's going to be a stain. And I think a lot of other people worry it'll be a tattoo. It's a lot easier to wipe off a stain, a lot harder to get rid of a tattoo. I'm not saying that from personal experience yet. Casey, David, Danielle, anyway, stick around with us. Up ahead, the chairman of the convention joins us. Plus, Kornacki is here with the big board with a look at what the Biden coalition might look like and actually why it actually might be better prepared than 2016 for a low turnout. But first, all this hour, we're going to be sharing some memorable moments from the second night of past Democratic conventions. They're kind of barn burner nights, sneaky barn burners. Let's start in 2004, when a young Illinois state senator named Barack Obama made a giant national splash, delivering the keynote address.
That's what this election is about. Do we participate in a politics of cynicism, or do we participate in a politics of hope? The hope of slaves sitting around a fire singing freedom songs. The hope of immigrants setting out for distant shores. The hope of a young naval lieutenant bravely patrolling the Mekong Delta. The hope of a mill worker's son who dares to defy the odds. The hope of a skinny kid with a funny name who believes that America has a place for him too. Hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. The audacity of hope.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job?
That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
But we actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A surge in coronavirus infection. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
A country reeling from a pandemic and racial injustice. The story changes hourly. The president's push to get children back into school is sinking in among families who are debating the safety of it. It's the 11th hour.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
A surge in coronavirus infection. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
A lot of years passed since 1832, and during that time it would have been most unusual for any national political party to ask a Barbara Jordan to deliver a keynote address. But tonight, here I am. And I feel that notwithstanding the past, that my presence here is one additional bit of evidence that the American dream need not forever be deferred.
Welcome back. That was 1976 when Texas Congresswoman Barbara Jordan made history as the first African-American woman to deliver a keynote address at a Democratic convention as we get ready for night 2 of the Democratic National Convention. We're going to take a look at how Biden could put together a winning coalition and why older white voters might be the secret to his success in November. And what it leads to, actually, is perhaps Biden can win in a low turnout scenario. And that's the big deal here. Our own Steve Kornacki joins me at the big board. We'll talk about that after, but show us this interesting path that is different from Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, let's take a look here. Basically, let's compare how things went in 2016 versus how they look in our most recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll. So first, three key demographic groups here: black voters, Hispanic voters, white voters. Take a look at 2016, and you saw Hillary Clinton obviously overwhelmingly winning the black vote, overwhelmingly winning the Hispanic vote, and then Trump with a 20-point margin among white voters. Now take a look at what we're seeing in our most recent poll. First, among African-American voters, here is Joe Biden. It's basically level. It's actually a point off Hillary Clinton's margin in 2016. How about Hispanic voters? There actually has been some growth here on the Trump side, not as much of a margin for Biden as there was for Clinton. But here is the biggest jump. This is the biggest single group, white voters, just in terms of size. A 20-point Trump margin in 2016 right now in our poll has been cut all the way down to 7. Now Trump leads by just 7 points in our poll among white voters. There's a reason for that. We can break that down a little further. Let's take a look at the white vote. We're always saying there's two groups of white voters that are increasingly voting very differently. White voters with a college degree and without a college degree. So again, let's take a look here. In 2016, Trump rolled up a huge margin among non-college whites. In the exit poll, he won college-educated whites by 3. There's some dispute about whether it was actually 3, whether Clinton might have won it, but Trump held his own among white college-educated voters. Look at this, though. In our poll now, a 23-point advantage for Joe Biden. If that were to hold up, if that were to happen on Election Day, that's just in territory in modern times we haven't seen for a Democrat. And then again, Trump's still cleaning up among non-college whites, but not as much. 37 points here, 24 points there. Not getting quite as much as he did out of this demographic group. And then you mentioned the other. Let's look at this from an age standpoint. In 2016, big advantage for Donald Trump. Senior citizens, 65 plus. He won them by 7 points in 2016. Take a look at what our recent polls found, and a lot of polls are finding this too. Joe Biden ahead by 7 among senior citizens. That's a double-digit switch there from where it was in 2016. Big voting block, high turnout voting block, hugely significant if Biden could hold on to that.
And this is the big deal, Steve. That is, you can have a low overall turnout. If this is what Biden is doing with these older white voters, you can have the low overall turnout that they got in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania in 2016. And with splits like that among older white voters, Biden carries all 3 states.
And add another one potentially, Florida. You know, Biden's been doing so well in that Florida polling as well. Win senior citizens. If you can win them by 7, could probably win Florida.
Can't help but wonder if that has to a little something to do with something called COVID-19. Anyway, Steve Kornacki at the big board with a tremendous stat that people need to understand here about what we're seeing in the electorate right now. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
So with me now on the phone is Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi. He's the chair of the Democratic National Convention. Congressman, it's good to, I would say, see you. I know we have a bit of a technical issue here. First of all, look, let's step back. Being able to chair a national convention, it's a great honor. It comes with a lot of headaches, I imagine. But this was unlike any other. I mean, walk me through sort of, has this both been an honor, stressful, this couldn't be easy. Suddenly, what is normally an honorary thing becomes so difficult.
Well, Chuck, it's actually been all of the above. As you know, we started out going to Milwaukee, doing what we considered a major convention activity there. We started scaling it back based on the pandemic, and we eventually had a sit down with the health professionals, and they said, look, you shouldn't do it. And Vice President Biden said, we won't. And so at that point, we put everything in high gear to come with the virtual convention. And so that's where we are. Everyone has cooperated. They understand what this pandemic is doing to this country. And we do not want to put anyone's life at risk for a political convention. And so here we are. We are moving forward. We are making history. This is the first virtual convention that we've done, and I'm excited about it. The cooperation is tremendous. The state parties, the elected officials, everyone is so good.
So let's talk about, has it been, everybody's being cooperative, which is really unusual for a convention, because normally you do, people have their own issues they want to bring up. How have you been able to sort of smooth out hard feelings? You know, I'm sure there are some progressives that wish they had more say here, maybe some establishment folks that have more say there. How have you smoothed over feelings, which I'm sure has not been easy?
Well, you know, we've included as many of those individuals who have concern on our speaker programs. You'll be seeing them all through the convention. We have a platform committee. That platform committee worked its will and will present the platform shortly. And so we have a big tent as Democrats. Democrats are known to be boisterous. Democrats are known to be strong on promoting their ideas. But at the end of the day, it's about defeating Donald Trump, and I'm convinced that we can do that.
Quite a few people associated with the Republican Party have been involved in both night one of the convention and now night two. This tent, I've used this metaphor before, can you keep stretching it?
Well, it's a big tent, and part of the reason you seeing the House of Representatives go Democratic is because we're growing the party. We're including everyone who wants to support the democracy at work. So now what you'll see tonight is the leadership of how we include the young, the elected, former presidents, everyone. So at the end of tonight, you'll see, based on the roll call vote, as well as the people who participate, a united Democratic Party. And that's what it's all about. Going into this election, we have to be united. And I'm convinced, based on last night and what you hear tonight, we are united as Democrats.
Very quickly, we've seen a resurgence of Democrats doing pretty well in a lot of southern states in statewide office. You get elected a senator in Alabama. Georgia's very competitive. South Carolina is more competitive today. There's a Democratic governor in Louisiana. Tell me about Mississippi. We've not seen that same surge yet for the Democrats. What would be your explanation?
Well, I will predict Mike Esper will be the first senator of color since Reconstruction here in the state of Mississippi. He's running a tremendous race. He's raising money. He's on the ground talking to people, doing what's required to win. So as we go for Joe Biden, so goes Mike Esper for the United States Senate.
Well, we'll be watching. Congressman Benny Thompson, longtime member of Congress from Mississippi, chairman of this unusual and historic first ever virtual convention. Thanks for joining me for a few minutes, sir.
Thank you.
Casey Hunt, David Plouffe, and Daniela Gibbs-Leger are back with me now. All right, so let's look a little bit at night two. David Plouffe, you worked very closely with Joe Biden. How would you make the case to people to say you should be for Joe Biden? What is the case for Joe Biden when you take Donald Trump out of the equation?
Well, it's hard to take him out of the equation, Chuck, because I do think we're going to see next week in the Republican convention and the whole fall, the suggestion, that Joe Biden is dangerous. He's mentally incapacitated. So first of all, what you need, Steve Kornacki just went through the numbers. So Joe Biden's first task coming out of this week and every day for the rest of the campaign is to try and hold those numbers as high as they are now with seniors, with college-educated white voters. And so the most important thing is he's a good man, he's smart, he's of good character, and he's got ideas that the majority of Americans support. So that is task one. That helps both on those that are voting primarily against Trump, but for Joe Biden. I think then, you've got to give people hope. I mean, I think there's despondency out there, understandably, about when are we actually going to get out from under this pandemic. You've got climate change, which particularly with younger voters is such a big driver. We see that we may not have ice, in the shelf in another few years, just reported this week. You've got economic, people in their 30s now, think about somebody who's 31. They've gone through the Great Recession and now this, which is close to a Great Depression. So you've got to give confidence that this isn't just a remedy to Trump, that this is somebody who's going to be on it, restore our alliances, focus on the middle class, focus on economic opportunity for young people. And I do think that that's complicated because this can't just be, I will handle the pandemic better than Trump, and I will do some smart economic policies. Right. Voters care about healthcare. They care about education. This is why campaigns are really difficult, because voters are not monolithic. So you got to do a lot of business this week. And one of the things I'm excited about with the digital convention is all these speeches are shorter. So you can have a lot of great bite-sized content that you can feed through advertising and organic consumption to reach those voters who care about those issues. So AOC's speech tonight may only be a minute, but I guarantee you that's going to reach millions of people and help them feel a little bit more excited about Joe Biden.
No, I think this is, when you look at this convention organization from a digital standpoint, I absolutely see what they're doing. I get, hey, as much as my business may care about TV ratings, I get what they don't, that they don't in this case. Daniela, when you see that statistic about Biden doing so well with older voters, and yet we've been this focus on, oh my goodness, he needs to excite younger voters, particularly younger voters of color. How would you do that with the Joe Biden you know? How would you get Joe Biden, get folks more excited about Joe Biden on the younger part of this electorate? And again, without, and maybe it's hard to separate Donald Trump from that equation, but how would you do it?
Yeah, I do agree with David that it's nearly impossible to take Donald Trump out of any equation because he sucks up all the oxygen out of the room. But I think there are many things that Joe Biden can do to continue to excite younger voters. The first one was picking Kamala Harris as his vice presidential running mate. Mm-hmm. I think she brings an excitement and energy to this ticket, and figuring out how to use her. Obviously, this is a very different campaign than anything that's ever been run before. But figuring out how to use her and have them be together more and show them more as a ticket, and not just sending her off. If we were actually in the world where we could do campaign events on own, but showing them as a combined ticket, so people can really get excited about the both of them. And I just want to emphasize, we shouldn't overlook the importance of hope. It may seem hokey to say that, but right. I talk to my friends who aren't super political, and they are looking to Joe Biden to give them a sense that things will be better. It's been a really rough couple of months, and we can't underestimate how much that has just messed with the psyche of this country. Yeah. So I think one way that you get people excited about your campaign is that you get them excited about a future that will be better than where we are right now. And that's really, really important.
Casey, one of the things that I thought was that I've always been, it always strikes me as odd when I read it, is this idea that, oh, Joe Biden knows he's a transitional leader, or his presidency will be a transitional presidency. You don't run to be a transitional president. You don't run to be a transitional figure. And I don't think Joe Biden believes his presidency would be that. It feels like they got to get out of that mode. These are people that talk about his candidacy in a way that they think it's being helpful. I don't know if that's helpful.
I'm not sure it is, Chuck. And I do think that perhaps it's changed with the pandemic. I mean, remember, Joe Biden has been running for president for a long time. All these people he ran against have been running for a long time, since well before we knew that we were going to be confronted with a global pandemic that was going to claim 170,000 American lives and change the way we live every day, that would send all of us into our homes to anchor coverage of a digital-only convention that normally we would all, be gathered for in Milwaukee. I mean, none of that was even something that we were thinking about. And, one of the things I feel like sources have emphasized to me is that, sure, they got to play the long game in terms of the party. And, Joe Biden is willing to be the gracious person who realizes that he has spent a long time on the national stage, and he wants to encourage the next generation to step up as he continues to lead. However, they have a huge undertaking ahead of them if they win. I mean, the day that they get into office, if he wins the White House, I mean, the to-do list is longer than perhaps any other president in recent memory in terms of trying to repair things that are clearly failing. We're still not testing enough Americans. I mean, just from an objective perspective, there's a lot to do here. And so from that perspective, they don't have time to be transitional, quote unquote. Well, and by the way, just remember, and David Plouffe would probably second this, George W. Bush, Barack Obama had a huge to-do list. He had to start working before he took the oath.
and he had a outgoing administration cooperating with him. So imagine having to deal with this to-do list without an outgoing administration cooperating. Anyway, among the various nightmare scenarios we're all that keep some of us up at night. Anyway, Casey, David, and Daniela, stick around. Up ahead, President Trump's push to counter-program the Democratic convention. We're going to take you live to Arizona. But first, let's go back to 1988, when Jesse Jackson brought his case to the Democratic convention floor that he, and not Michael Dukakis, should be their nominee. Take a listen.
In the end, faith will not the support. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you're qualified and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job? That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A surge in coronavirus infection. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
A country reeling from a pandemic and racial injustice. The story changes hourly. The president's push to get children back into school is sinking in among families who are debating the safety of it. It's the 11th hour.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
A surge in coronavirus infection. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Hi, I'm Kristen Urquiza. I'm one of the many who has lost a loved one to COVID. My dad, Mark Anthony Urquiza, should be here today, but he isn't. My dad was a healthy 65-year-old. His only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump, and for that, he paid with his life.
Welcome back to NBC's special coverage of the 2020 Democratic National Convention on NBC News Now. You just heard perhaps one of the most powerful moments from last night and something that will get shared a lot on social media. Arizona resident Kristen Urquiza blaming President Trump directly for her father's death from COVID-19. Well, today, President Trump campaigned in Urquiza's home state of Arizona, and it is important to note that the disclaimer you see on your screen right now is what attendees to this event agreed to by registering for today's campaign event with Donald Trump. It says, in short, quote, in attending the event, you and any guests voluntarily assume all risks related to exposure to COVID-19. So joining me now from Yuma, Arizona, is our own NBC News political reporter, Vaughn Hilliard. So, Vaughn, the president with this convention tour of sorts of battleground states in Arizona, what's the reception been?
The rallies are back on for the Trump campaign for all intents and purposes. Between his Minnesota and Wisconsin stops yesterday, here in Yuma today, he'll be in Scranton, of course, Joe Biden's hometown, on Thursday, ahead of the Democrat accepting his party's nomination. What you saw here today in Yuma was nearly 1,000 folks inside of an airport hangar here behind me. It was hot, more than 110 degrees, but the president gave a speech that went up and down the market, like normal for Donald Trump. This is a reality in which the president feels like he needs to be here in Arizona. He flew across the country from Washington, D.C. to be here today, and it's because just 4 years ago, Chuck, he won Arizona by just 3.5 percentage points. And you and Steve were just going through the numbers, and there may be no better place to look here than Arizona. Let's say Joe Biden is able to take back Michigan and Pennsylvania. Arizona was where it's at. The interesting part, Chuck, is that Yuma has now been visited twice by this president in less than 2 months now.
And would you call Yuma a swing part of Maricopa?
Well, the county's only about 200,000 people. It's only about makes up about 4% of the overall Arizona electorate. But I think what he's using this as, I was talking with an individual with the Trump campaign and said, this is a key backdrop. You know, this campaign over the course of the year has tried to run on this mantra of promises made, promises kept. Well, that's why, again, he is visiting the border wall, touting 300 miles of new border wall construction. He was touting USMCA trade agreement, essentially making the case that his standoffs on the trade front has been worth it. He was making the case to, this is a military community here too. He's making the case that he has defended the military. There's a Marine Corps air base here with more than 10,000 military and their family members. You can hear a couple of F-35s above me right now, but he's using this as a backdrop because if you look up to Maricopa County, Chuck, which is largely a suburban region here of Arizona, they're expecting to take a drop-off in support there that could cost them the state, and that's why they need to juice up support in more of these rural counties here like Yuma.
You know, Vaughn, you work really hard to make your live shots. Well, you orchestrated a flyover just when you were talking about the military. I tell you, even Kerry Sanders wouldn't have been able to pull that off. Vaughn Hilliard reporting for us in Yuma, Arizona. Vaughn, good work, sir. Thanks very much. And stay cool if you can. Up ahead, we're going to talk with Alabama Senator Doug Jones as night 2 of the convention is about to get underway. But first, here's a moment from the 1980 convention. This is when Senator Ted Kennedy officially ended his bid for the presidency with a phrase that's still iconic today.
For me, a few hours ago, this campaign came to an end. For all those whose cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job?
That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A surge in coronavirus infection is developments on several fronts.
The story
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
A country reeling from a pandemic and racial injustice. The story changes hourly. The president's push to get children back into school is sinking in among families who are debating the safety of it. It's the 11th hour.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
A surge in coronavirus infection. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Welcome back. We are just moments away from the start of night 2 of the Democratic National Convention. They're going to start a little earlier tonight with convention business, getting things like the Rules Committee report and the Platform Committee report out of the way before the 9 p.m. official start time. As we said, night 1 of the convention was dominated by speeches that tore down President Trump rather than ones that built up Joe Biden. But there was one exception to that last night, and that was a speech from Alabama Democratic Senator Doug Jones. The incumbent senator in Alabama, who is facing a very tough re-election fight. Senator's remarks on civil rights and his personal support for Joe Biden.
I've known Joe for more than 40 years. I met him as a wide-eyed law student, and he's been my friend and champion ever since. The Joe I know is exactly the leader our country needs right now.
Well, Senator Doug Jones joins me now. You know, Senator, I'm guessing you had a lot of really smart people who thought they were giving you good advice that said, you shouldn't do this. Don't go to the convention. You're in a red state. And I'm sure, you know, I could give you a list of Democratic senators in tough re-election fights that decided to skip their party's convention in a presidential year. You didn't. It's not easy politics for you, is it?
Well, it's, you know, for me, Chuck, it is. I appreciate the opportunity. For me, it really is. I mean, this is who I am. You know, and I'm not going, you know, I've been waiting 40 years for Joe Biden to get the nomination for president of the United States. I wasn't going to miss this opportunity. And I do believe he is a president for our times. And I really believe that he represents so much that's good in America and can unify this country. And so for me, it was an easy call. When I got asked, I was honored to do it. And I think it's important to have a voice like mine, coming from the South, coming from a state that's very diverse, to try to unify America.
Look, you had no problem bringing Joe Biden down to your campaign the first time. What is it about Joe Biden that you think doesn't scare voters in Alabama?
Well, I think he relates to people. People, he's empathetic. When you talk to Joe Biden, you're talking to your next door neighbor. You're talking to a relative. You're talking to somebody who empathizes with you, that he listens to you. And that's really important. Joe listens to people. He can talk to folks and he can try to find that common ground. And so it's really important that I think people understand that Joe has been in Alabama a lot over the years. I kind of feel like Jim Clyburn stole my line. You know, we know Joe and Joe knows us because he has been there, and folks can relate to that. He is that kind of everyday Joe that people can relate to.
You know, you have been very clear in both of your campaigns. You're not going to be you're willing to work with President Trump when you think it's good for Alabama. Is it getting harder and harder to say that line?
Well, it has been during this pandemic for sure, because I haven't seen very much that's been better. Now, in the middle of this pandemic, Chuck, we passed the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization, and there were a lot of things in there that President Trump advocated for that I agreed with and we supported. But in the midst of this pandemic, with regard to the healthcare crisis and the way it's been handled, the economic crisis, and certainly the equality crisis, the racial inequality crisis that we have seen, it is harder for those areas for sure. But we'll go back. We can find things that we can always find that common ground on.
What do you tell a Trump supporter right now that says, I just, this issue of supporting Trump means too much to me. I like you, Doug, but what do you say to that voter?
I tell them that I'm not trying to get them to not support President Trump. I'll let Joe Biden make that case. That's not my job. My job is to let them know that I'm the one that's got their back. And if you look at a lot of the things that the president has done, it has not been in the best interest of Alabama, whether it's this pandemic or a number of things. I want folks to know that regardless of who the president is, whether it is a President Trump or whether it's a President Biden, my loyalty is to them, and I've got their back. And that's who I'm going to be looking for. And that's what I've done in the last 2.5 years in the United States Senate. Not everybody's going to agree with me on everything, but I think by and large, agriculture, farmers, teachers, healthcare workers, unions, businesses, it's hard to argue when you get the Chamber of Commerce awards. It kind of belies that socialism kind of thing when the Chamber of Commerce gives you those awards, Chuck.
Do you feel like you're getting enough help from the National Democratic Party, or is that a tricky thing for you and the party because you want some distance?
Well, look, I think we're going to get help that we need. We've said all along, I want to run my race. I did that in 2017. I want to control our race. I want to control our message and where we are. We can't control independent expenditures. As you know, I'm getting hit with $5 or $6 million worth of TV ads right now that are coming in, just slamming me one way or another. Disingenuous ads, some completely false. But we're going to run our race. We're getting our record out there. People have watched me. They've seen me. They understand that I've got their back, and that's the most important thing, regardless of what money comes in to help me on the side.
Do you wish the Democratic super PACs were coming in to help you?
Here's what I have wished for and what I saw last night, that Democrats have voices from all across America, from all ends of the political spectrum. Just think about this last night, Chuck. You had on the one hand Bernie Sanders and on the other hand Governor Kasich. And you had me and Gretchen Whitmer and Amy Klobuchar and Jim Clyburn and Andrew Cuomo kind of sandwiched in between. And then Michelle Obama is just a rock star unto her own. But that's the voices that I think are important. And that's what's important to the people of Alabama. Governor Kasich said it really best for the folks in Alabama. They're not going to let Joe Biden be pushed too far to the left. He's representing folks from all across this country, can unify people. He's not going to let that happen. I believe that. I've said it for 40 years now with Joe.
You going to get a debate? I see you're having a hard time getting your opponent to agree to one.
It's kind of interesting. He has not talked about any issues. He's, as a former football coach, and he won't even come out of the locker room for some reason to play the game. So we'll see. We've said that we would debate. I'm not going to throw down the gauntlet like Jeff Sessions did. People know who I am. They know I'm willing to debate and to talk about the issues and to talk about the things that matter to the American and the people of Alabama.
Well, we're happy to host. We'll do it virtually, whatever. We like debates here, and we like to see candidates engaging. It's better for the democracy. Anyway.
I completely agree with you, Chuck.
All right. Senator Doug Jones, Democrat from Alabama, thank you for coming on and sharing your views with us, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck. Great to be with you.
You got it. Still with us as we get closer to 9 p.m. Eastern, Casey Hunt, David Plouffe, Daniela Gibbs-Leger. And Casey, I got to emphasize here, it is political risk for Doug Jones to participate in a Democratic National Convention. And you and I both know there's plenty of smart guys, smart women who would have said, don't do it. But, there is a personal connection between him and Joe Biden.
Well, and that's the difference that Joe Biden himself makes, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about the ideology and, all of the reasons why people want to set aside what would be qualms about appearing at something like this, why Bernie Sanders suddenly seems much happier than he seemed 4 years ago when he was going through this same process with Hillary Clinton. What's the connective tissue? It's Joe Biden himself. And it is the personal relationships that he builds with people, regardless of political party. Everybody that has worked with him, that covers him at length, that runs into him in the hallways in Congress. I mean, he treats everyone the same way. He treats people like their family. And I think that it's something that crosses party lines. It's about who he is himself. It's hard to find people. There are plenty of people who will criticize Joe Biden's policies in Washington. Sure. It is hard to find people that will criticize the man himself. And I think that's why you have somebody like Doug Jones, who, I've sat in Doug Jones' office and heard him tell stories about being a young lawyer working on the Judiciary Committee when Biden was a young senator. And the fact that that relationship sustained for so many years speaks to Biden's character. And, the reality is that's what they're trying to sell to the American people. Right. And as David Plouffe, I'm sure, knows, it's a lot easier to sell something that's actually the real deal than to try to convince people of something that, maybe is a different version of the truth, if that makes sense.
Well, David, I was just going to say, I think you saw it firsthand in the White House. If he finds out somebody doesn't like him, he's like obsessed with making that person like him. Right?
Yeah, he is. But it is genuine. He is one of the most empathetic people in the world, not just in politics. And I think that's one of the reasons, these relationships are so strong, why you see more and more Republicans willing to come out and speak to him. On the Doug Jones question, my belief has always been, the cowardly way is to say, I'm not going to appear at my party's convention or with my presidential candidate. I think you lose a lot more in that. You gain something by standing up and saying, you know what, I know I don't agree with everything this person says, but let me tell you where I stand. So I've never agreed with I'm going to duck it, because I think you lose all the votes anyway. And he needs very powerful African-American turnout in a non-battleground state to have any chance of holding on. So I think it's very smart. But listen, Joe Biden's empathy, yes, he is a retail politician. So he wants to convince you that he's right, that you should like him, that you should, have a cup of coffee afterwards. But he just comes to it naturally. We all have personal stories. When my father passed away, I remember talking to my mother, maybe 10 days after that. And she's like, I talked to Joe Biden again. I'm like, what do you mean you talked to Joe Biden again? He hadn't even told me. He was calling my mother to check in to see how he was doing. He didn't know my mother. So there's millions of stories like this. I don't know how he finds the time, but he's a special human being.
No, it is interesting. Daniela, Doug Jones is not somebody that complains, but I did hear him talk about all these ads running against him. It does sound like he'd like some help, but that the National Party, they're prioritizing other Senate races.
Yeah, I kind of read a little bit between those lines as well, and I can understand why it might be a little bit of a double-edged sword for him to have national money coming in. But, look, I've always been a really big Doug Jones fan, and I think he's cool. And I think it makes perfect sense why he spoke yesterday, especially when you consider the support that he got from the people who are supporting Joe Biden, which are African-American women. So who knows? Maybe after yesterday, some more folks will start supporting Doug Jones. And I find it very ironic that he's running against a football coach who's afraid to take the field against him.
Casey Hunt, I'm just curious, since we're sticking on Senate and I only have about 40 seconds, do you get the sense, what is the sense of forlorn on the Republican side of the aisle in the Senate about November? Do they think they still have a chance, or do they all assume, let's just hope it's not a blowout?
I think it's pretty bleak, Chuck. I think some are, they're trying to figure out a way to hold out hope, move the pieces around the map to make things try to work for them. But the reality is their candidates are running behind President Trump by and large. It's not true in every single case, but when you look at the polls and the internal numbers that they're reading, the president, despite his difficult numbers, is ahead of them. And that explains, their actions when they're asked about, the president's policies. They don't want to criticize him because they then alienate these Republicans who are apparently, or, voters, Republicans or not, who are going to go in, pull the lever for Trump and not for them.
We shall see. Casey, David, Daniela, Thank you all. Tremendous hour. You guys were great. Thanks for being with us this entire hour, for all of you watching. Night 2 of the Democratic National Convention is about to begin. Just like last night, we are handing it over to their pre-recorded program. We will see if there's any issues. We will come back and help you out to navigate it. But it's roll call night. That's always fun, even virtually. Enjoy.
You too. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation, one nation,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My fellow Americans, this is my country. Many of us have fought hard for the right to say that. Many are now struggling today from the Harlem to Da Nang so that they may say this with conviction. This is our country.
We are a people in a quandary about the present. We are a people in search of our future.
We must make the American people hear our tale of two cities. We must convince them that we don't have to settle for two cities, that we can have one city, indivisible, shining for all of its people.
If you give us a chance, we can perform. After all, Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did. She just did it backwards and in high heels.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
The American dream is not a sprint or even a marathon, but a relay. Our families don't always cross the finish line in the span of one generation, but each generation passes on to the next the fruits of their labor.
We are one people, all of us pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, all of us defending the United States of America.
Welcome
to the second night of the Democratic National Convention.
This is a different kind of convention.
Look at the camera and smile.
And
This is a different kind of keynote.
is a different kind of keynote.
This year,
all of us are on stage, and we've got a lot to say.
Let's get real. There's a lot riding on this election.
When we're facing the biggest economic and health crisis in generations, because our president didn't and still doesn't have a plan.
When doctors, nurses, and home health care aides in Philadelphia have to risk their own lives to protect others because there's not enough protective equipment.
When factory workers in Ohio are faced with dangerous conditions because this administration hasn't given clear guidance on how to protect our people.
When teachers in Gwinnett County, Georgia, and across the country are being asked to return to the classroom without a plan to keep them safe, and parents are exhausted juggling full-time work and full-time childcare.
And visiting our parents and grandparents through the window of a nursing home, worrying all the time that they'll get sick.
When unemployment in North Charleston, South Carolina, a city I represent, has risen nearly fourfold, and evictions are putting families out on the street in the middle of a pandemic.
Make no mistake, it didn't have to be this bad. In the early days of the virus, Donald Trump didn't listen to the experts. And then he said something that a president should never say.
He said, I don't take responsibility at all.
No responsibility.
No leadership.
No plan.
He still doesn't have a plan. Donald Trump just doesn't understand. We can't fix our economy
until we get a hold of the virus.
While working families are struggling, he's looking out for the people who are already doing just fine. The wealthy, the big corporations, the donors to his campaign.
He's looking out for himself.
But there's one person who's looking out for us.
All of us.
And that's Joe Biden.
Joe called it. We are in a battle for the soul of our nation.
But Joe knows we can never let hard times turn us against each other.
And we can never stop doing the hard work to make things right.
That's why we ran for office.
Even when people counted us out.
Even when there had never been a Latina in the Nevada State Senate.
Or a Democrat elected as Florida Commissioner of Agriculture in nearly 3 decades.
Or an openly gay man in the Georgia state legislature.
When Birmingham hadn't had a mayor this young in 120 years.
We ran for office because we know the struggles American families are facing. Because we've lived them.
We've lived the insecurity and the indignity of an eviction notice.
I, like many of you, have lived the frustration of paying off student loans.
We have lived the grief of losing loved ones to gun violence and the criminal justice system that unfairly targets our communities.
We have lived that feeling of helplessness when someone you love is very sick and access to healthcare is a matter of life and death.
By the way, Joe Biden has lived a lot of this too.
He was raised in a middle-class family in Scranton, Pennsylvania and Claymont, Delaware.
He watched his dad look for work and learned that a job is about so much more than a paycheck. It's about dignity and respect.
He was sworn into office from the hospital room of his 2 young sons after a car crash killed his wife and infant daughter.
He knows what it's like to thank God you have health care.
He knows what it's like to work hard for everything you've got.
He knows what it's like to send a child off to war.
And he'll never forget who he's fighting for.
I look around my district in North Texas, and I see the people who built this country, the educators, like the single mom who raised me, the men and women on the front lines of our healthcare system. You built this country.
Small business owners, like the ones whose shops and restaurants line the streets of Birmingham, Michigan,
Charleston, South Carolina,
of tribal nations,
line the streets of Philadelphia, and bring our communities to life. You built this country.
The nurses in Memphis who came out of retirement to treat patients during this pandemic. You built this country.
And you know what? You deserve more than the constant chaos that Donald Trump delivers.
You deserve health care you can afford, a job that pays you fairly. You deserve child care and paid sick leave while you work. And when you pay into Social Security and Medicare, you deserve to know it will be there when you retire.
And that's why we ran.
And thanks to the voters across the country in both red states and blue states,
we won. A new generation of leaders is rising up.
And with Joe Biden in the White House, there's no limit to what we can do.
In Nevada, we're making drug prices more transparent, so people with chronic illnesses won't go broke while drug companies get rich.
Joe's working to protect and expand the Affordable Care Act. He'll make sure millions of people keep their coverage and no one can be denied for a pre-existing condition. He'll bring down the cost of health care and prescription drugs too, giving tax credits to working families and allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices.
That's a big effing deal.
That's a big effing deal.
Because Joe knows we can't have a healthy economy if people can't afford health care.
But let's remember, Donald Trump is suing to take health care coverage away from more than 20 million Americans and eliminate protections for over 100 million with pre-existing conditions.
In the middle of a pandemic.
In Texas, we're standing up for fierce women like my mom and my tias who raised me to never back down from a tough fight. So we're fighting to make sure that mothers have access to health screenings for safe pregnancies and childbirth. And we're bringing long overdue justice to survivors of sexual assault.
Joe Biden has been fighting for women his entire career. As senator, he authored the Violence Against Women Act. And as president, he'll restore funding for Planned Parenthood. He will codify Roe v. Wade and make reducing maternal mortality, especially for women of color, a top priority.
In Florida, on the front lines of our climate crisis, we're working to produce more renewable energy and shrink our carbon footprint.
Joe has a major plan to invest in clean energy, jobs, and infrastructure.
In the House of Representatives, we're closing loopholes to ensure local infrastructure projects use American-made materials and local labor and support American manufacturing.
Unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden will actually enforce Buy American rules, investing in American-made clean energy, building materials, high-tech equipment, and R&D, all creating more good jobs.
In Michigan, we're banning business practices that have exploited workers and cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in lost wages.
When unemployment is the highest rate since the Great Depression, when millions of people have seen their hours and pay slash, Joe knows it's not enough to rebuild the economy the way it was before. We've got to build it back better.
He'll build an economy that rewards work, not wealth, and get rid of the Trump tax cuts that only benefit big corporations and the rich. And then he'll invest in healthcare, education, and infrastructure, and in getting small businesses up and running again.
Take it from me. When you're in the trenches, you want Joe Biden right there next to you.
When I wanted to marry the man I loved, Joe Biden was the first national figure to support me and my family.
Appreciate you, man.
When the auto industry was going under, Joe stuck his neck out to protect it and helped save 1.5 million auto jobs.
When our economy was on the brink, Joe led the recovery effort that created millions of jobs, including here in Western Pennsylvania. Under his leadership, America bounced back with the longest economic expansion in history.
You know, the one Trump brags about creating?
That's what happens when Joe Biden is in your corner. Working families get a fair shot.
He understands that leadership means fighting for the people who built this country. All of you.
All of us.
This nation belongs to all of us. And in every election, we choose how we will create a more perfect union. Not by taking sides, but by taking stock of where we are and what we need. This year's choice could not be more clear. America faces a triple threat: a public health catastrophe, an economic collapse, and a reckoning with racial justice and inequality. So our choice is clear: a steady, experienced public servant who can lead us out of this crisis just like he's done before, or a man who only knows how to deny and distract, a leader who cares about our families, or a president who only cares about himself. We know Joe Biden. America, we need Joe Biden. To make your voice heard, text VOTE to 30330. In a democracy, we do not elect saviors. We cast our ballots for those who see our struggles and pledge to serve, who hear our dreams and work to make them real, who defend our way of life by protecting our right to vote. Faced with a president of cowardice, Joe Biden is a man of proven courage. He will restore our moral compass by confronting our challenges, not by hiding from them or undermining our elections to keep his job. In a time of voter suppression at home and authoritarians abroad, Joe Biden will be a champion for free and fair elections, for a public health system that keeps us safe, for an economy that we build back better than before, and for accountability and integrity in our system of justice. We stand with Joe Biden because this isn't just about defeating Donald Trump. We are in this to win for America. So let's get it done.
Hello, I'm Tracy Ellis Ross, and how exciting to hear from young elected leaders from across the country. A perfect way to begin night 2 of the Democratic National Convention, Uniting America. Tonight is all about leadership. This unprecedented moment calls for leadership, steady, inclusive leadership, driven by people who understand that our democracy is based on the value of each and every one of us being treated with dignity and respect. Leaders who respond to the needs of hardworking Americans who, right this minute, are unable to pay rent, put food on the table, and keep their loved ones safe. As a Black woman, I find myself at a crucial intersection in American politics. For far too long, Black female leadership in this country has been utilized without being acknowledged or valued. But we are turning the tide. Hello, Kamala. Her nomination is historic for anyone who believes in we the people. Like Senator Harris and many we saw in the keynote, today's leaders emerge from communities that have long been underrepresented. They're charting new paths in the spirit of Shirley Chisholm, Charlotta Bass, Fannie Lou Hamer, and John Lewis. They get in good trouble, necessary trouble. They call things out otherwise ignored, elevating our nation and changing the course of our lives for the better. With every vote we cast for forward-thinking, honest leaders, we chip away at ingrained systems of inequity, and we bend the arc of justice. True leaders make sure that policy is informed by all of us, bridging our burdened past to a safe, equitable, and even joyful future. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are that bridge, heeding voices from within the movement for racial justice, listening to the people, and acting with empathy and compassion to reflect our shared humanity. Tonight, we'll hear from a number of American leaders, including former Acting U.S. Attorney General Sally Yates, who refused to defend an unconstitutional travel ban and paid for it with her job.
The threat to this nation, to our democracy, is real. It's clear and it's present. You've watched the president now for 3 years. Look at what he's doing. Instilling fear. I mean, not joking. Instilling fear. Sowing division. Stoking racial division. Undercutting every institution that was designed to check the abuse of power by the president or anyone else. All this for what reason? All this in order to solidify his base and expand his power.
Good evening. I'm Sally Yates. Speaking at a political convention is something I never expected to be doing, but the future of our democracy is at stake. I'm here in my hometown of Atlanta, where as a young lawyer, I joined our nation's Justice Department. For nearly 30 years, through Democratic and Republican administrations, I worked alongside my DOJ colleagues to advance our nation's promise of equal justice. I served as Deputy Attorney General in the Obama-Biden administration and stayed on as Acting Attorney General for the Trump transition. Then, 10 days in, I was fired for refusing to defend President Trump's shameful and unlawful Muslim travel ban. That was the start of his relentless attacks on our democratic institutions and countless dedicated public servants. Like me, these officials didn't swear an oath to a person or a party. Public servants promised to defend our Constitution, uphold our laws, and work on behalf of the American people. But from the moment President Trump took office, he's used his position to benefit himself rather than our country. He's trampled the rule of law, trying to weaponize our Justice Department to attack his enemies and protect his friends. Rather than standing up to Vladimir Putin, he fawns over a dictator who is still trying to interfere in our elections. He's even trying to sabotage our postal service to keep people from being able to vote. His constant attacks on the FBI, the free press, inspectors general, federal judges, they all have one purpose: to remove any check on his abuse of power. Put simply, he treats our country like it's his family business, this time bankrupting our nation's moral authority at home and abroad. But our country doesn't belong to him. It belongs to all of us. Joe Biden embraces that. He has spent his entire life putting our country first. He has never backed down from a challenge or a bully. He summons the best in us and lives by the values that define us as Americans: service, integrity, courage, compassion. There are countless stories of Joe Biden reaching out to someone in their moment of need. Well, this is our country's moment of need. We need a president who respects our laws and the privilege of public service, who reflects our values and cares about our people. We need a president who will restore the soul of America. We need Joe Biden.
Over the last 4 years, we have experienced failed leadership under Donald J. Trump.
We've had to deal with this insanity.
I've watched our country deteriorate.
The cover-ups, the lying, the favoritism.
The disregard for the Constitution.
Donald Trump has failed America.
It is time for us to reclaim our constitutional and democratic values.
We need to prove to the world, and most importantly, prove to ourselves that we are better than this.
We need an experienced leader, a leader that has passion, integrity, and strategic leadership skills.
And his name is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Joe Biden is that leader.
And he really wants the best for this country.
He understands and respects our democracy, the rule of law, and the U.S. Constitution.
He will move toward creating a more perfect union.
Hi, this is Senator Chuck Schumer, Democratic leader from my hometown, Brooklyn, New York. Behind me is a sight I see out of my window every night, the Statue of Liberty, the same sight that greeted hopeful immigrants like my grandparents, a symbol of freedom and a beacon of hope to the world. Today, Donald Trump has divided our country, diminished our greatness, and demeaned everything that this statue represents. He even hid in a bunker as Americans were tear-gassed and beaten. Millions are jobless. 170,000 Americans have died from COVID. And Donald Trump says it is what it is. Presidents should never say it is what it is. President Lincoln, honoring the great sacrifice at Gettysburg, didn't say it is what it is. President Roosevelt, seeing a third of the nation ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished, didn't say it is what it is. America, Donald Trump has quit on you. We need a president with dignity, integrity, and the experience to lead us out of this crisis. A man with a steady hand and a big heart who will never, ever quit on America. That man is my friend, Joe Biden. He will be a great president. But if we're going to win this battle for the soul of our nation, Joe can't do it alone. Democrats must take back the Senate. We will stay united, from Sanders and Warren to Manchin and Warner. And with our unity, we will bring bold and dramatic change to our country. Let me tell you some of the things we do. With President Biden, Vice President Harris, and a Democratic majority, we will make health care affordable for all. We'll undo the vicious inequality of income and wealth that has plagued America for far too long. And we'll take strong, decisive action to combat climate change and save the planet. We will protect voting rights, fight systemic racism in the criminal justice system and in our economy, and restore a Supreme Court that looks out for people, not corporations. We'll rebuild our infrastructure and make sure every home, from inner city to rural America, has broadband. We will save the post office and once and for all defeat COVID-19, this evil disease. And, beckoned by the lady behind us, we will reform our immigration system so that immigrants yearning to breathe free will at last become American citizens. Together, we can reignite the hope once felt by millions of men and women, huddled masses on creaking ships, who glimpsed this mighty woman with her torch, knowing they could build a better life here in America. and out of this long national nightmare, America will finally awaken to a brighter future and a new day.
Senator Chuck Schumer reminding us that leadership requires integrity and accountability. Real leaders don't ask what we can do for them. They ask what they can do for us. In a minute, we will hear from two former presidents, and they're going to speak to that. But first, here are Caroline Kennedy and her son, Jack Schlossberg.
60 years ago, in a crowded LA stadium, my father accepted the Democratic nomination for president. He challenged Americans to look to the future and join him on a journey toward a new frontier.
It was a call to the young at heart, regardless of age or party. Times have changed, but the themes of my grandfather's speech, courage, unity, and patriotism, are as important today as they were in 1960. And once again, we need a leader who believes America's best days are yet to come. We need Joe Biden.
I've admired Joe Biden since I was a Senate intern in 1974. He shared my Uncle Teddy's commitment to civil rights, women's rights, and working families. He was a senator who cared, who led, who inspired. That's why I helped choose him to be Barack Obama's running mate in 2008. When I was U.S. ambassador to Japan, I got to see Vice President Biden in action. He stepped off Air Force Two wearing his aviator glasses and a big smile, radiating American optimism and generosity. I saw a leader who was tough but fair, who commanded the trust and respect of other nations, and who always put America's interests first. Joe Biden's lifetime of public service reflects his unwavering commitment to our highest ideals.
In this election, our future is on the ballot. For my generation, it will define the rest of our lives. We need to tackle climate change. We need to end systemic racial injustice. We need to make healthcare available for everybody, and we need to rebuild an economy that helps working families. We can do this. We can reach these new frontiers, but only with a president who asks what he can do for our country and what together we can do to build a better world. It's up to us. Let's get it done. Let's elect Joe Biden the next president of the United States.
It's a great pleasure for Jimmy and me to join you in celebrating our next president of the United States, Joe Biden. We've known and admired Joe and Jill for many years, and most recently, I've worked with him on tackling the demands faced by the more than 53 million unpaid caregivers in our country who are juggling work and other family responsibilities and putting their own physical and mental health and well-being at risk. Joe knows well, too well, the sorrows and struggles of being a family caregiver. From Joe's time as a young widower, thrust into single parenthood with a demanding job, to he and Jill caring for their own parents and their son Bo at the end of their lives. He knows caregiving is hard, even on the good days. Jill and I also know the challenges of caregiving for those who served in the military and returned with visible and invisible wounds. And we know those caregivers need a leader in the White House. Jimmy and I are voting for Joe because he recognizes the challenges facing our families and has the heart and the talent to make life better for all Americans.
When I ran for president in 1976, Joe Biden was my first and most effective supporter in the Senate. For decades, he has been my loyal and dedicated friend. Joe has the experience, character, and decency to bring us together and restore America's greatness. We deserve a person with integrity and judgment, someone who is honest and fair, someone who is committed to what is best for the American people. Joe is that kind of leader, and he is the right person for this moment in our nation's history. He understands that honesty and dignity are essential traits that determine not only our vision, but our actions. More than ever, that's what we need. In these uncertain times, Joe Biden realizes that many American lives can be saved each day with the use of masks and testing as recommended by our medical experts. Joe Biden must be our next president.
Good evening.
A presidential election is the world's most important job interview. At the end, we hire a leader to help us solve problems, create opportunities, and give our kids better tomorrows. That's a tall order this year, with the COVID-19 outbreak on a path to killing 200,000 people and destroying millions of jobs and small businesses. How did Donald Trump respond? At first, he said the virus was under control and would soon disappear. When it didn't, he was on TV every day bragging on what a great job he was doing, while our scientists waited to give us vital information. When he didn't like the expert advice he was given, he ignored it. Only when COVID exploded in even more states did he encourage people to wear masks. By then, many more were dying. When asked about the surge in deaths, he shrugged and said, "It is what it is." But did it have to be this way? No. COVID hit us much harder than it had to. We have just 4% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's COVID cases. Our unemployment rate is more than twice as high as South Korea's, 2.5 times the United Kingdom's, more than 3 times Japan's. Donald Trump says we're leading the world. Well, we are the only major industrial economy to have its unemployment rate tripled. At a time like this, the Oval Office should be a command center. Instead, it's a storm center. There's only chaos. Just one thing never changes: his determination to deny responsibility and shift the blame. The buck never stops there. Now you have to decide whether to renew his contract or hire someone else. If you want a president who defines the job as spending hours a day watching TV and zapping people on social media, he's your man. Denying, distracting, and demeaning works great if you're trying to entertain or inflame. But in a real crisis, it collapses like a house of cards. COVID just doesn't respond to any of that. To beat it, you've got to actually go to work and deal with the facts. Our party is united in offering you a very different choice: a go-to-work president, a down-to-earth, get-the-job-done guy, a man with a mission to take responsibility, not shift the blame, concentrate, not distract, unite, not divide. Our choice is Joe Biden. Joe helped bring us back from a recession before, and he can do it again. In 2009, Barack Obama and Joe Biden started with the worst economy since the Great Depression. And when they were done, they delivered more than 6 straight years of job growth. What did Joe do? He accepted responsibility for implementing the Recovery Act. His work created a lot of new jobs and started many new companies in communities across our country. Now Joe's committed to building America back again. How? He's given us smart, detailed plans to invest in areas vital to our future: innovative financing for modern factories and small businesses, good jobs in green energy and conservation to combat climate change, a modern infrastructure that brings small town and rural America the connectivity and investment others take for granted, and a plan to ensure that Black Americans, Latino Americans, Native Americans, women, immigrants, and other communities left behind are full participants in our economy and our society. Joe Biden wants to build an economy far better suited to our changing world. Better for young people, better for families working and raising their kids, better for people who lost jobs and need new ones, better for farmers tired of being collateral damage in trade wars, better for workers caring for the sick, elderly, and people with disabilities, better because of a living wage and access to affordable higher education and health care, including prescription drugs, and to child care, a secure retirement, and for the first time, paid family and medical leave. Joe won't just put his signature on a check and try to fool you into thinking it came from him. He'll work to make sure that your paycheck reflects your contribution to and your stake in a growing economy. In this job interview, the difference is stark. You know what Donald Trump will do with 4 more years: blame, bully, and belittle. And you know what Joe Biden will do: build back better. It's Trump's us versus them America against Joe Biden's America, where we all live and work together. It's a clear choice. The future of our country is riding on it. Thank you.
It's time to call the roll and officially nominate the Democratic candidate for President of the United States. But this year, for the first time, the roll call is heading out to all 57 states and territories, places that showcase our nation's natural beauty, places where people are working together to secure a better future for our country, and places that are working to rebuild and recover, like Iowa, where thousands have been left homeless and hundreds of thousands have been left without power in the wake of last week's terrible storm. Our hearts are with you, Iowa. There's so much going on right now. Tonight, we come together to nominate a candidate who will fight for all of us. The convention delegates will do the official nominating, but you can join them in supporting Joe Biden. Text JOIN to 30330 to get involved. And now, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, Tom Perez.
It's great to be here in Milwaukee, a proud union town whose grit and character reflect the resilience of our party and our country. There's no doubt these last few months have been tough, but good leadership means being able to adapt to any situation. And I want to thank the people of Milwaukee for being such gracious and flexible hosts. It's also great to be back in Wisconsin, where I was lucky enough to marry my wife, Anne Marie, a little more than 3 decades ago. The progressive movement has deep roots here. And since today is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment's ratification, we should point out that Wisconsin was the first state to ratify it. What's more, in its one-word motto, forward, Wisconsin captures something so important about America. The way that no matter what challenges today brings, we always believe a better future is possible. That's what my parents believed when they emigrated to this country nearly a century ago, fleeing the iron fist of a brutal dictator in the Dominican Republic. This nation welcomed them with compassion, and they quickly learned that their hope of building a better life through hard work was shared by generations of Americans. Indeed, every American story is a story about that hope, that sense of possibility. It's what unites us, defines us, and it's what sustains us now. We will work to meet our extraordinary challenges because progress is made by the hopeful, not the cynical. And we will do that work together because movements are built by the many, not the few. And as you watch tonight's decidedly unconventional roll call and reflect on the diversity of our nation, remember, you too are part of the American story. And no matter where you come from or where you're watching from tonight, you have a place in Joe Biden's Democratic Party.
Delegates and distinguished guests, under our procedural rules, 2 Democratic candidates submitted nominating documents to our convention secretary for the office of President of the United States, Senator Bernie Sanders and Vice President Joe Biden. As such, each candidate has provided names of individuals who will make nominating and seconding speeches on their behalf. We will begin with nominating and seconding speeches for Senator Sanders. Speaking on his behalf will be 2 progressive champions, Bob King and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I'm Bob King. As a proud union member and former president of a great American union, the UAW, I am honored to nominate Bernie Sanders for president. For decades, Bernie has led the fight for working families, fighting for workers' rights to organize unions and collectively bargain. In a time of enormous inequality, he understands that we must confront large corporations which have far too much control over our economy and our politics. Bernie believes health care is a human right and should not be contingent on a job. He knows we can rebuild our crumbling infrastructure by creating millions of good-paying union jobs while combating climate change. Bernie's moral clarity has emboldened the Democratic Party's fight for justice. The grassroots energy of his supporters has cemented important advances in our platform. Bernie will continue to lead a movement that helps defeat Trump and delivers transformational change. I'm excited to place into nomination the name of a great champion of the working class, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Good evening, bienvenidos, and thank you to everyone here today endeavoring towards a better, more just future for our country and our world. In fidelity and gratitude to a mass people's movement working to establish 21st century social, economic, and human rights, including guaranteed health care, higher education, living wages, and labor rights for all people in the United States. A movement striving to recognize and repair the wounds of racial injustice, colonization, misogyny, and homophobia, and to propose and build reimagined systems of immigration and foreign policy that turn away from the violence and xenophobia of our past. A movement that realizes the unsustainable brutality of an economy that rewards explosive inequalities of wealth for the few at the expense of long-term stability for the many, and who organized a historic grassroots campaign to reclaim our democracy. In a time when millions of people in the United States are looking for deep, systemic solutions to our crises of mass evictions, unemployment, and lack of health care, en el espíritu del pueblo and out of a love for all people, I hereby second the nomination of Senator Bernard Sanders of Vermont for President of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. King and Representative Ocasio-Cortez. We now turn to nominating and seconding speeches for Vice President Biden. In a moment, we'll hear from Senator Chris Coons, who holds the Delaware Senate seat once held by the Vice President, and Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester, my colleague in the House. But first, we'll hear from Jacqueline Asby, a working American who met Joe Biden in a most unexpected place, the elevator where she worked.
I take powerful people up on my elevator all the time. When they get off, they go to their important meetings. Me, I just head back to the lobby. But in the short time I spent with Joe Biden, I could tell he really saw me, that he actually cared, that my life meant something to him. And I knew, even when he went into his important meeting, he'd take my story in there with him. That's because Joe Biden has room in his heart for more than just himself. We've been through a lot, and we have tough days ahead. But nominating someone like that to be in the White House is a good place to start. That's why I nominate my friend, Joe Biden, as the next president of the United States.
I'm Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, a small state where people expect to see their senators and even sometimes their vice president at the supermarket, at a church festival, out in their community. Joe fights for us because he knows our struggles and hopes. He knows the pain of loss and the worries of working parents. And he's always brought that same personal concern he showed for Jacqueline to getting things done as our senator and then as President Obama's vice president. Joe's tackled gun violence and climate change. He stood up to dictators and supported our troops. He led the recovery effort after the last recession and delivered on a promise to make our healthcare system fairer and stronger. Through it all, Joe Biden's never forgotten where he's from. He's been sustained by his faith and his family through the toughest of times, and he has the heart and the compassion for this moment. For all of these reasons and more, it's my honor to second the nomination of my good friend, Joe Biden, to be the next president of these United States.
I'm Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. In some history class in the future, children are learning about this moment. They're learning about our pain, our grief, our worry. But they're also learning about a man named Joe Biden, about how he restored decency to our government and integrity to our democracy. They're learning about how we conquered a pandemic, stood united for racial justice, and built our economy back better than before. They're learning about how his leadership gave their generation a fighting chance. They're learning about us, too, about the resolve and the unity we showed against the forces of hatred and division, about the work we will do over the next 11 weeks. and about the night when, despite our distance, we came together to nominate Joe Biden for President of the United States, a nomination I'm honored to second.
Thank you all. Pursuant to our convention rules, we'll now proceed to a roll call by states on the selection of our party's candidate for the President of the United States. Secretary Ray.
Mr. Chairman, coming to you live from the Wisconsin Center, it's time to begin our virtual trip around America. Our journey begins at the site of a major step forward in our national journey towards justice. Let's go to Alabama.
John Lewis marched across this bridge in 1965 to demand the right to vote. A lifetime later, civil rights and voting rights remain America's great, unfinished business. But those who walked this path before us showed us the way forward. If we want to honor John Lewis's incredible life, let's restore the Voting Rights Act and ensure that our democracy belongs to all Americans. Alabama cast 8 votes for Bernie Sanders, and the great state of Alabama cast 52 votes for our next president of these United States, Joe Biden.
Alaska.
The waters we rely on to feed our families and make a living are threatened by climate change. When Joe Biden was vice president, he and President Obama made sure Alaska's tribes had a say on how these waters were managed. Donald Trump took it away. We must elect a president who will respect our voices, protect our waters, and address climate change. Alaska cast 7 votes for Bernie Sanders and 12 votes for the next president, Joe Biden.
American Samoa.
Joe Biden honors our service, and we trust him to support our community. As vice president, he helped expand rural infrastructure to communities like ours, broadening our economic capacity. As president, he will continue to strengthen rural America from New England to the Pacific.
On behalf of the Governor Lolo Matalasi Molinga and the American Samoa Democratic Party, we proudly cast 11 votes for our next president of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
Arizona.
As a middle school teacher, I know that public educators are doing everything they can to make sure our students have quality learning experiences this fall. As a mother of a high school freshman, I know that it's far from perfect. As an NEA union organizer, I'll fight to make sure that it's scientists, parents, and educators that decide when it's safe to go back to school, not politicians. As an Arizona Latina, I proudly cast our votes, 29 for Bernie Sanders and 51 for our next president, Joe Biden.
Arkansas.
Feeding people is an act of love, and I think we all can use a little extra love these days. So we took our food trucks out into the community to deliver meals made right here at the Clinton Presidential Center for our neighbors in need. Even when our leaders let us down, America kept looking out for each other. Arkansas cast 9 votes for Bernie Sanders and 27 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
California.
Climate change is not a hoax. It's real, and communities of color have been bearing the brunt of this reality for generations.
Joe Biden's plan to crack down on polluters to protect our air and water is about environmental justice and economic justice.
He'll prioritize equity and bring new clean energy jobs to Black and brown neighborhoods, because that is how we build back better.
California, home to our next vice president, Kamala Harris, cast 231 votes for Bernie Sanders and 263 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Colorado.
Han and I grew up in poverty as immigrants, but we've been able to make a decent living. We're extremely lucky. But now we have 3 family members that tested positive for COVID, and it just doesn't feel safe to put Evan and Emma back to school. This is certainly going to be hard on them and on us, but millions of working families will have it much harder. I know Joe Biden cares about these struggles, and that's why I trust him to fight for us. With 1 abstention, Colorado will cast 36 votes for Bernie Sanders and 42 for our next president, Joe Biden.
Connecticut.
Firefighters are proud to put our lives on the line every day to protect our neighbors. It's a badge of courage. But while we are protecting your family, we need a president who is committed to protecting ours, and that's Joe Biden. He has the courage we respect and the commitment to working Americans we need now. On behalf of our governor, Ned Lamont, I am honored to cast Connecticut's 75 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Delaware.
Delaware passes.
Delaware passes. Democrats abroad.
We represent the millions of Americans who live outside the United States and vote back home. Americans abroad can make a difference in the states that will decide this year's elections. We need your help to elect a president who will restore our standing around the world. Go to votefromabroad.org to learn more. Democrats Abroad is proud to cast 10 votes for Bernie Sanders and 7 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
District of Columbia.
Welcome to my hometown and the best city in the world. Washington, D.C. is 706,000 residents strong. We raise families, pay taxes, and serve the United States military, just like every American in the 50 states. The House of Representatives just passed an historic piece of legislation to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. From Black Lives Matter Plaza, the District of Columbia proudly cast 1 vote for Bernie Sanders and 43 votes for the next president of the United States, Joe Biden.
Florida.
When my daughter was murdered in Parkland, Joe Biden called to share in our family's grief. I quickly learned about his decency and his civility, but I also learned about his toughness and how he's beaten the NRA. Together with the other victims of gun violence and our nation's youth, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take on the NRA again and win. Let's win back our freedom to live without fear. Florida cast 57 votes for Bernie Sanders and 192 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Georgia.
My mentor, Congressman John Lewis, knew that the right to vote is sacred. Georgians know that our ability to vote is under attack. Long lines, voter suppression. Donald Trump is even trying to slow down the mail and force us to risk our lives to cast a ballot. We will not be silenced. Take out your phone and text VOTE to 30330 and make sure your voice is heard in this election. From the cradle of the civil rights movement and in the spirit of good trouble, Georgia cast our 117 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Guam.
70 years ago this summer, Chamorros became U.S. citizens. We are proud of our resilience, proud of our indigenous heritage, and proud to be part of this historic moment for our party and our nation. From the land where America's day begins, Guam cast 2 votes for Bernie Sanders and 11 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Hawaii.
I came from the Philippines to Hawaii, the land of indigenous Native Hawaiians. Today, I want to speak to my fellow immigrants, to the essential workers on the front line, to the service members who wear our flag, to the parents with big dreams for their children. No matter where we came from, immigrants belong in our country's long fight for justice. We belong in the America we are building together. Hawaii, birthplace of President Obama, cast 9 votes for Bernie Sanders and 23 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Idaho.
We're not waiting for Washington to act on climate change. Here in Boise, we know that clean energy doesn't just mean a healthier planet, it means good, paying jobs. Imagine what we could do with a president that listens to science and leads with courage. Idaho cast 9 votes for Bernie Sanders and 16 for our next president, Joe Biden.
Illinois.
Discrimination has denied too many Black Americans the chance to own a home and build wealth. Joe Biden has a plan to end racist lending practices and help more people of color achieve the American dream of owning a home. This isn't just about racial justice. It's about stronger communities and more economic security for working families. Illinois cast 59 votes for Bernie Sanders and 122 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Indiana.
Here in South Bend, we once feared that our best days were behind us. But then we reimagined our economy with new jobs and even new industries. The Hoosier State is ready to lead America's recovery with our diverse communities, our talented workers, and our best-in-the-world agriculture. Joe Biden's plan gives us a blueprint to revitalize industrial cities and rural areas alike. Indiana casts 2 votes for my friend Bernie Sanders and 86 votes for the next president, Joe Biden.
Iowa.
We were going to talk to you tonight about biofuels, but the powerful storm that swept through Iowa last week has taken a terrible toll on our farmers, our small businesses, and our families who are still without power.
So while we have the honor of casting Iowa's votes, 11 for Bernie Sanders and 38 for Joe Biden, we also want to ask you to keep Iowans in your thoughts during this difficult time.
Kansas.
I'm a 4th-generation family farmer, but I worry about the next generation. Many of our young folks end up living from rural communities to find jobs. Joe Biden has a plan to help new farmers get a good start. And by funding schools and health care, he'll make sure that rural communities remain great places to live, work, and raise a family for generations to come. Kansas, the Sunflower State, proudly cast 10 votes for Bernie Sanders and 35 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Kentucky.
One day when I was 14, my mom wouldn't wake up. Calling 911, I was scared not only because she was sick, but because I knew we couldn't afford the bill. Thank God she survived. When I told Joe Biden that story in 2008, he promised to continue to fight for folks like us and got busy passing Obamacare. 2 years ago, when Mom had a heart attack, we only had to worry about her getting better because Joe kept his promise. The Commonwealth of Kentucky cast all 60 votes for the next president of the United States, Joe Biden.
Louisiana.
This used to be an abandoned building. Now it's a thriving art studio, a community hub, a place where independent artists can make their name and parents can bring their kids during these difficult days of remote learning.
Our cities are strong because our people make them strong. And our economy will come back because our small businesses will bring it back.
Louisiana cast all 60 of our votes for my friend and the next president, Joe Biden.
Maine.
My American dream, I'm living it. A 25-acre organic farm on the lake, a roadside farm stand, and a bed and breakfast. My husband and I aren't corporate tycoons. We just want to make an honest living and feed our community. Small businesses like ours are the backbone of rural economies across America. Joe Biden has a plan to help more Americans, especially people of color, start their own businesses. Maine casts 9 votes for Bernie Sanders and 22 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Maryland.
Black lives matter. And when it comes to racial justice, Black opportunity matters.
When Joe Biden rebuilds our middle class, he won't leave anyone behind. His plan, more capital for Black entrepreneurs.
More funding for public schools and HBCUs.
Banning racial discrimination in the housing market.
And paying every worker a fair wage.
That's building back better.
Maryland.
The home of Frederick Douglass.
Cast 1 vote for Bernie Sanders and 119 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Massachusetts.
We need a plan to get the economy going again. Joe Biden will get the pandemic under control, create new jobs in manufacturing and clean energy, help small businesses and our restaurants recover, and build back better so that our economy is stronger and fairer than it was before. Massachusetts cast 30 votes for Bernie Sanders and 83 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Michigan auto workers are the best in the world, but we'd be nowhere without Joe Biden. And a lot of folks wanted to let Detroit go bankrupt. But Joe Biden believed in us, and together we fought to save our auto industry.
Now he's got a plan to create 1 million new auto jobs by investing in clean energy. Joe Biden believes in American workers. He's got our back, and we've got his.
Michigan cast 53 votes for Bernie Sanders and 92 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Minnesota.
I'm here in Minnesota, the home of the headwaters of the Mississippi River. We know that a bridge shouldn't fall down in the middle of America, but it did. And we came together to rebuild it. That's what we do in America. That's what Joe Biden will do as president. He'll build back better. He'll cross the river of our divides and unite this country from our cities to our suburbs to our rural areas. And now we will virtually cross the great Mississippi to St. Paul to hear from my friend, Mayor Melvin Carter.
Thank you, Senator.
As the 46th mayor of a city that's more than ready for our 46th president, I'm proud to cast Minnesota's 31 votes for Bernie Sanders and 60 votes for our next U.S. president, Joe Biden. Mississippi.
Tougaloo College reflects the progression of a people from slavery to citizenship to scholarship and leadership, contributing to Mississippi and the world. Our alumni are leaders like Convention Chairman Congressman Benny Thompson. Joe Biden wants to invest $70 billion in HBCUs like Tougaloo. Imagine what impact that could have on HBCUs. Imagine what impact HBCUs.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of NBC News live coverage of the 2020 Democratic Convention. And as we come on the air, the roll call vote to nominate Joe Biden for president is underway. It does not look familiar to you, but they found a different way.
You know, this is the real business of the convention, to nominate the candidate. Like the convention itself, the roll call is virtual in this age of COVID. Right now, all 57 U.S. states and territories are casting their ballots remotely. Some are live, some are on tape, and we're going to be following this roll call as it plays out. It happens over several minutes. There are a lot of states who want to be counted. You see the tally at the bottom of your screen. We're going to bring you highlights as we go this evening, and we will, of course, go to that big moment when Joe Biden officially clinches the nomination with 2,374 votes needed.
We can dip in if you want. There's Montana now.
Game changer for rural communities like mine, and Joe Biden has a plan to make it happen. Montana cast 1 vote for Bernie Sanders and 18 votes for our next president, Joe Biden.
Nebraska.
And that's the way it's been playing out. This is really a nomination on location. There are also some big speeches ahead this evening, including former Secretary of State John Kerry, who was the Democrats' 2004 presidential nominee, former Secretary of State Colin Powell, a Republican, and tonight's headliner, Joe Biden's wife, Dr. Jill Biden.
Well, it's been a busy night already. They've been on the air, about over an hour now. We've seen a number of noteworthy speakers, including former President Bill Clinton. As the roll call continues, let's take a listen to some of the earlier speeches.
In a time of voter suppression at home and authoritarians abroad, Joe Biden will be a champion for free and fair elections.
Our party is united in offering you a very different choice: a go-to-work president, a down-to-earth, get-the-job-done guy, a man with a mission to take responsibility, not shift the blame, concentrate, not distract, unite, not divide. Our choice is Joe Biden.
Good evening, bienvenidos, and thank you to everyone here today endeavoring towards a better, more just future for our country and our world. In fidelity and gratitude to a mass people's movement working to establish 21st century social, economic, and human rights, including guaranteed health care, higher education, living wages, and labor rights for all people in the United States.
Those are some of the highlights from speeches we have seen so far tonight. As we continue to monitor the roll call vote in progress, we want to turn to NBC News political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Chuck, it's night 2 for the Democrats, the first ever virtual convention. Are they finding a way to make the case?
You know, it's interesting. I would argue in this first hour, and I've noticed it both during the keynote and even during this roll call, guys, is that tonight we are seeing a little bit of the pro-Joe Biden argument. You know, one of the more interesting findings in our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that came out this week was the breakdown of Joe Biden's support. A large majority, 58% of Biden voters tell us they're primarily voting for him because it's a vote against Trump. Just 36% of his voters say that they are voting for Joe Biden. I have heard more of the for Joe Biden case tonight, much more than we heard last night. Look, is plenty of folks, it is hard to sort of separate the two issues. It's not, you know, you can't really say, oh, let's talk about Joe Biden without the context of Donald Trump, right? He is, you know, all-consuming when it comes to this campaign. But I do think that, unlike last night, which was a totally anti-Trump affair, I do think we're starting to hear some of the case for Joe Biden and a little bit of the personal biography of Joe Biden. I'm getting a lot more of that tonight than I did last night.
That's kind of by design. Isn't tonight all about leadership?
Well, you would assume with Joe Biden being the sort of the premier speaker of the night that yes, and that this is, you know, if the best contrast they believe they have with Donald Trump is Joe Biden's character versus Donald Trump's character, then I think it does behoove them to spend a lot of time talking about Joe Biden's character.
They're also going to put an emphasis, Chuck, on foreign policy, national security. Gives us a good chance to check in with Andrea Mitchell, our senior Washington correspondent. Andrea, we're going to hear from two former secretaries of state, one who has worked for a Democrat, one who has worked for Republicans. What do you expect?
Well, they're going to be talking about leadership and their view that Donald Trump has abandoned our allies, has coddled dictators like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, and has really abandoned America's leadership around the world. You're going to hear from Colin Powell the validation of someone who has endorsed the Democrats before. He's endorsed Hillary Clinton, he's endorsed Barack Obama, but he's never appeared at a Democratic convention. He's appeared at a Republican convention, interestingly, several of them. One I saw in 2000 where he was booed from the floor for endorsing affirmative action. And that was the beginning of his departure from the Republican Party over race issues. But tonight he'll be talking about leadership and what they see as Donald Trump's failure in leadership around the world.
Andrea, thank you very much. We want to dip right back into the roll call. As I said, this is the business of the convention, and they're about to hit that magic number that will make Joe Biden officially
I think you just hit the number,
of the Democratic Party.
There's the check mark. I think you just went over.
Ladder that could take you anywhere. Joe Biden knows that everyone deserves a chance to climb that ladder. So as a proud tribal member, as a Mexican American, and as a Harvard graduate, I am proud to cast North Dakota's votes. 10 for Bernie Sanders and 8 for our next president, Joe Biden.
Northern Mariana Islands.
Half a day, T-Roll, and hello from paradise, the Northern Mariana Islands. We may be far away, but we're American citizens. And this year, for the first time in decades, we finally have a Democratic slate, because Democrats organize everywhere. But we don't get to vote for president, so please don't waste yours. The Northern Mariana Islands is proud to cast 2 votes for Senator Bernie Sanders and 9 votes for
All right. Well, Joe Biden over the top over 2,374 delegates needed to clinch the nomination. He will go from presumptive nominee to nominee of his party. Normally, we would expect some big demonstration of applause, but of course, we're not living in that kind of environment anymore. NBC's Kristen Welker is in Wilmington, Delaware tonight, just across the street from where Dr. Jill Biden will be speaking in just a short time from now. Kristen, do we have some sense of what she'll say, what her message will be here for the crowd tonight?
We do, Lester. Dr. Jill Biden is Joe Biden's closest confidant, his wife of more than 40 years. And so she is going to speak about Joe Biden in deeply personal terms. She's going to do it at this high school behind me. This is where she taught English years ago. And she's going to make this about leadership, and she'll make education really the centerpiece of this. She's going to argue that in order to send children back to school in a safe environment, the United States needs new leadership and needs her husband, Joe Biden. I'm told she's going to speak about him as a father, as a husband, as a man, and also someone who has endured great loss. Part of her excerpts say, how do you make a broken family whole the same way you make a nation whole? With love and understanding. So that really frames, I think, the messaging that we will hear from Dr. Jill Biden. And as Chuck was saying, last night we heard from a number of speakers, including former First Lady Michelle Obama, who really unleashed a searing indictment of Donald Trump. This is going to be the personal case for Joe Biden. Now, Jill Biden is no stranger to defending her husband. We all remember that on Super Tuesday, she was on stage with him and even blocked a protester who was coming up on the stage. And so this is a role with which she is quite comfortable and quite familiar. You can expect a full-throated but very personal defense of her husband. Lester.
Yeah, Kristen, thanks. About 7 minutes left in the roll call right now. You continue to watch that in the upper right corner of your screen. Democrats, as always in these conventions, determined to show a united front this week, but there has been some daylight between the party's progressive and moderate wings. Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt's been watching that play out for us. Casey, good evening.
Good evening, Lester. That's right. You have seen unity be at
absolute forefront for the Biden campaign. But there have been some small cracks over the course of the last day and a half. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been at the center of those cracks. We saw her speak briefly earlier tonight, seconding the nomination for Bernie Sanders, that part of the formal unfolding of the convention that we are now seeing play out in primetime because this is all virtual. She actually didn't mention Biden's name, but she talked about the movement that sent many votes and some delegates here at this convention to Bernie Sanders. She is, of course, probably the highest profile new young member of Congress. She has, in many ways, a celebrity following that other young progressive members of Congress don't have the way that she does. She was criticized by John Kasich, the Republican former governor who spoke last night, for being too extreme, was what he said. And she hit back at him on Twitter, saying that his views on issues like abortion, for example, don't line up with where Democrats are. So that, of course, what the Biden campaign had been trying to avoid through all of this. That also in a little bit of tension with the more moderate wing of the Democratic Party that looks to include people like Alabama Senator Doug Jones, for example, someone who's running for re-election in a red state. But by and large, Lester, Democrats have managed to hold this together and present a mostly united front with a few exceptions here.
All right, Casey, thanks.
Well, as we continue to watch this roll call, instead of being from a convention floor, it's from 57 states and U.S. territories. And we just saw a few moments ago, actually, Puerto Rico pledging their delegates in Spanish with subtitles. Obviously, one of the keys to the 2020 election for Democrats is that block of Latino voters. They make up more than 13% of all eligible voters in this country, and they are concentrated in some key battleground states, too. Let's go now to Jose Diaz-Balart. He's anchor of Noticiero Telemundo and the Saturday edition of Nightly News, our colleague. And, you know, there's a lot to the Latino vote, far more than immigration, Jose. And Latinos do not want to be overlooked by the Democratic Party.
Absolutely not, Savannah. Great seeing you. Absolutely. You know, we just concluded a poll at Noticias Telemundo and BuzzFeed on young Latino voters. Interesting numbers. 64% of young Latino voters said they will definitely be voting this coming November the 3rd. 60% say they're going to be vote for Biden. 19% for Trump. 60% for Biden is pretty much what Hillary Clinton got from Latino voters last time around, much less than the 71% that President Obama received from Latinos in his re-election campaign. But interesting, issues, COVID and many others. But immigration still is an important place where Joe Biden and Donald Trump are far different. The 11th of July, I interviewed President Trump in an exclusive for Noticias Telemundo, and he said that he was going to have an executive order, this is July 11th, on Dreamers, on DACA. He's going to be legalizing Dreamers. He said that he was going to do that within 4 weeks. We're in August 18th and still nada as far as immigration from President Trump. That's a difference from the policies of Joe Biden. And Savannah, as I kind of wrap it up, you know, an interesting number came out of that poll between Noticias Telemundo and BuzzFeed on Latinos. 33% of Latinos that were polled said someone who showed up and has shown up for the Latino community in the United States, 33% said nobody. Joe Biden and Senator Sanders, 6%, and Donald Trump at 3%. So a lot needs to be done still.
All right, Jose, thank you very much. And as we watch the roll call as it unfolds, we turn to Chuck Todd, who actually does have a podcast. But anyway, Chuck, break it down for us. I know you're at your map, so show us where these battlegrounds are. What is the road to 270 electoral votes for either candidate?
By the way, it's the Chuck Todd cast.
I know,
so,
it's very clever.
Right. That's right, that's right. More importantly, I have missed this. We don't have this in the Todd household in my home studio. It is nice to have the interactive map back. But here is our road to 270. This is the NBC News political unit. This is our competitive battleground map. All the gray states are where both campaigns are spending money actively trying to win. So this is the playing field. These gray states, from Nevada in the west in Arizona up to Maine's 2nd Congressional District, even the Nebraska 2nd Congressional District, those Midwestern states, this is where we believe the race begins, and this is where we have it right now. And right now, we would have Biden already with a win. We've got these states, he's got a 10-point lead nationally. And right now, we have some of these big battleground states, from Nevada to Arizona to Florida to North Carolina, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, all already, quote, lean Biden, meaning we think Biden has a lead of 5 points or more. What's interesting here, Savannah, is that the states we haven't assigned, Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, and Texas, are, quote, toss-up states right now. He doesn't have to win any of them, and he'd still win the presidency with Barack Obama-like electoral vote numbers.
You're talking about Joe Biden, but just for those who remember this movie from 2016, Chuck, when folks like you and all of us put up polls and put up maps that said that Hillary Clinton would win, and now you're showing a similar map, I think a lot of people are probably sitting home a little skeptical.
That's okay. I'll give you the Trump path. It exists. It's legit. It's the same thing. I mean, there's a way for him to do this. It's very narrow. But when you're trailing in the national popular vote by the numbers he's trailing, in order for the president to get to this path, he needs to get a job approval rating north of 46%. He's not been north of 45 in our poll for over a year. And he's going to have to get his popular vote number to that 47. And he can win that way, but it is a very difficult path as things stand right now.
But part of this model is from a pre-pandemic model. Biden has to defend those states. How does he do it without traveling on the ground? How does he pull it off and defend these places without getting some flesh on the ground?
Well, look, I think right now this is the issue for the Democrats. I think they know that there's some concern that when it comes to getting out the vote, when you need to get out the vote in places like Georgia, places like Milwaukee, you do need people on the ground. You need people dragging people that, come on, you got to vote. I'll come drive you to vote. And I think that is a concern. I think this is why this convention looks the way it looks. This is why this convention has got a lot of, you got to get out there and vote, because they're going to have to do this virtually, Lester. And you know what? That is harder. And I think there are some nervous field people in Team Biden.
Yeah, and you go back to Michelle Obama yesterday. What was her point? Is trying to get out that vote. I think that Democrats clearly see if you can't get on the ground.
Get the comfortable shoes. Get the comfortable shoes to stand in line.
All right, we're about at the end of the roll call.
That's right. We're almost at the end of alphabetical order, but two states get to go last. Wisconsin, because, of course, it was supposed to be the site of the real convention before the pandemic, and then the home state will vote, and we will let that play out live. Let's listen.
A great city on native land on a great lake. It's the place where I was born and raised, right in the heart, the 53206 zip code. Now, this is a community that's been faced with some significant challenges due to historical injustice, but what many don't see is the joy, the resilience, and opportunity that lies within this community and so many others across America just like it, where hardworking people are fighting to provide for their families and to build a better future. We know that we build a better future for our nation by channeling Wisconsin's legacy as the birthplace of the labor and the progressive movement, and uniting around a bold, inclusive agenda that uplifts every community in the pursuit of a more just future, one that recognizes health care as a human right, one that tackles the climate crisis and takes on racial and economic justice. Wisconsin cast 30 votes for Bernie Sanders and 67 for the next president of the United States of America, Joseph R. Biden.
Delaware.
Long before this train station bore his name, you'd see Joe Biden up here on the platform with the rest of the crowd, on his way to work or going home to his family. That's always been his North Star, delivering for families like his own, working people who struggle and sacrifice to build a better life. Nobody has ever had to wonder who Joe Biden's in it for.
Our nation faces daunting challenges, but I've known Joe Biden for 40 years, and there's nobody I trust more to lead our party, unite our country, and restore our standing in the world. What's more, he's humble. He tells the truth. He treats everybody he encounters with respect and builds bridges, not walls. He is a leader made for this moment and the finest public servant I've ever known.
Delaware is proud to cast its 32 votes for our favorite son and our next president.
Our friend, Delaware, Joe Biden.
Live look at Joe Biden reacting to the Zoom-like crowd celebrating his nomination.
The Zoom call is stretching across the country. We've now heard from 57 U.S. states and territories. That's, I guess, our first glimpse of Joe Biden live, direct, and Jill Biden right there. They got the celebration. This is what a virtual convention, this is the balloon drop. Andrew Mitchell, normally you would be on the floor, but this is what it looks like in 2020. And here we go, the Democrats trying to really get the enthusiasm up virtually, but also
I'm going to bring balloons
literally.
on Thursday.
You should bring balloons, Chuck.
Whatever.
And don't forget the confetti glitter as well.
This is a homespun
Andrea
moment.
really close to me. It's going to be nothing but confetti and balloons
in fact,
here in the.
I can guarantee you that the Bidens are as excited being there. You can see their children, their grandchildren. Joe Biden and Jill Biden are as thrilled to be there as they would be to be on the floor. Here he comes.
Has officially been nominated by the Democratic Party as our candidate for President of the United States. Vice President Biden is hereby invited to deliver an acceptance speech.
Well, thank you very, very much. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all. It means the world to me and my family, and I'll see you on Thursday. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Might be the shortest speech Vice President Biden has ever given because he's got a big one coming up on Thursday night. But that's
so does his wife, Dr. Jill. We'll be hearing from her shortly. Chuck, just walk back for a minute. South Carolina. Before South Carolina, it was he's fighting for his political life, his last chance, his last shot, and tonight he accepts the nomination.
Lester, I'm old enough to remember when we thought we were going to be covering a contested convention in Milwaukee.
Oh, yeah.
We thought, remember that? There's just no way this is all going to happen. But can we take a step back? I mean, it's a Joe Biden, this is a remarkable journey to this nomination. This was never the Joe Biden year. 1988 was a Joe Biden year. 1992 was a Joe Biden year. Maybe 2008 was a Joe Biden year. It was never supposed to be now, and yet you never know when your moment comes. So you got to say it's a remarkable journey. He's had an extraordinary career that suddenly now has gotten a little more extraordinary.
All right, Chuck, Andrea, everybody stand by. We're just getting started. We've had the official business. Joe Biden is now officially the nominee of the Democratic Party. More speeches. We are awaiting speeches from John Kerry, Colin Powell, two former secretaries of state, and Dr. Jill Biden just ahead. We'll take a quick break. We're back after this.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job?
That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A surge in coronavirus infection. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
A country reeling from a pandemic and racial injustice. The story changes hourly. The president's push to get children back into school is sinking in among families who are debating the safety of it. It's the 11th hour.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
A surge in coronavirus infection. New developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
This year's election is going to be a little different. Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season. That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
In a time of voter suppression at home and authoritarians abroad, Joe Biden will be a champion for free and fair elections, for a public health system that keeps us safe, for an economy that we build back better than before, and for accountability and integrity in our system of justice. We stand with Joe Biden.
That's voting rights advocate Stacey Abrams speaking earlier this evening, and that brings us to a major moment in history being celebrated today, the ratification 100 years ago today of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, granting women the right to vote. Andrea Mitchell has more on this for us. Andrea, you had a fascinating story on Nightly News tonight. Tell us more.
Well, we learned so much from this anniversary celebration. It's something to celebrate 100 years of emancipation for women to have the right to vote. But the true story, the untold story, is that black women were marginalized in the suffrage movement. They were segregated in the marches in New York and in Washington as it led up to this anniversary when it finally got through Congress, then had to get through the states. It was finally today, 100 years ago, voted with one vote in Nashville, Tennessee. Tennessee was the last vote, and it was because a young 24-year-old freshman legislator, he got a letter from his mother the night before, written in pencil. We have a copy of the letter saying, you know, do the right thing, be a good boy, basically vote for ratification, and he switched his vote, and they won the vote. But black women still, after this anniversary 100 years ago in 1920, they still couldn't vote because most black women lived in the South, and in the South it was the Jim Crow South, Lester and Savannah, and they had to fight for the right to vote, and that fight went all the way with, you know, great women leaders on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, Amanda Boynton, and of course Fannie Lou Hamer, until the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And of course, that fight still goes on today with people like Stacey Abrams, still fighting against voter suppression, and Sherilyn Ifill and all sorts of great women leaders who started the suffrage movement and then became civil rights leaders in the emerging civil rights movement, and their descendants still today.
Well, Andrea, let's bring Kristen Welker, our colleague at the White House, in on this conversation. And Kristen, you study politics pretty much 24 hours a day, as far as I can tell. And the female vote for the Democratic Party, absolutely essential.
It's essential. It could not be more critical, Savannah, and that was underscored when Joe Biden said that he was going to pick a woman vice presidential nominee. And true to word, he did, in fact, do that, and he picked Senator Kamala Harris. She is, of course, a history-making pick. She is the first woman of color to serve as a vice presidential nominee on a major party ticket. And so undoubtedly, Democrats feel as though that will help them, the ticket itself, reach out to women voters. And we saw that last night when we heard from former First Lady Michelle Obama, her forceful indictment against President Trump, speaking not only on behalf of all Americans, but on behalf of women. And of course, they have taken aim at President Trump in the White House for some of what they have argued is divisive rhetoric, and rhetoric that is offensive to women, tweeting about housewives. And I can tell you, based on some conversations with officials inside the White House, they're concerned that that type of rhetoric could backfire. So Democrats have that front and center as they head toward November, Savannah.
All right, Kristen, thank you. And we're awaiting a speech this morning from someone quite remarkable. His name is Adi Barkan. In 2016, he was diagnosed with ALS, a neurodegenerative disease. And instead of surrendering to that illness, he actually became politically active, an advocate for health care reform, and he has traveled the country. His voice has changed, though, over these years, and Casey Hunt joins us with a little bit more about his story and what we're about to hear in a few moments.
It's really such a remarkable story, Savannah, and everyone is going to hear how this disease has changed his voice when he speaks here. But this is a man who, after he was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, decided he couldn't stay silent. He became an advocate for Medicare for All. He endorsed progressive Democratic candidates. He's interviewed many of them over the course of the last few months. But tonight he's going to be endorsing Joe Biden and saying that he really is the person who is going to protect people's health care against President Trump. But really, the focus here on his inspiring personal story. Savannah.
Yeah. He's 36 years old. He has 2 children. He's from California, and he was diagnosed 4 years ago. And tonight he addresses the Democratic National Convention as an advocate and an activist and somebody speaking on behalf of those suffering this condition. Let's listen.
Hey Carl, it's me, Dad. By the time you're watching this, you will have grown up to be strong and courageous, but I don't know how much longer I'll be around for you.
I was diagnosed with ALS today, which is a deadly, debilitating disease.
After I was diagnosed, the president passed a tax bill that put my health care at risk. So I went to Washington, D.C.
My next guest made headlines when he confronted a Republican senator on an airplane.
You can be an American hero. I wanted to help create a better country for you to live in. Democracy is beautiful! Democracy is beautiful! All that matters to me is to make you proud, because I'm already so proud of you.
Hello, America. My name is Audie Barkin, and I am speaking to you through this computer voice because I have been paralyzed by a mysterious illness called ALS. Like so many of you, I have experienced the ways our healthcare system is fundamentally broken. Enormous costs, denied claims, dehumanizing treatment when we are most in need. Since my shocking diagnosis, I have traveled the country meeting countless patients like me, demanding more of our representatives and our democracy. Today, we are witnessing the tragic consequences of our failing healthcare system. In the midst of a pandemic, nearly 100 million Americans do not have sufficient health insurance. And even good insurance does not cover essential needs like long-term care. Our loved ones are dying in unsafe nursing homes, our nurses are overwhelmed and unprotected, and our essential workers are treated as dispensable. We live in the richest country in history, and yet we do not guarantee this most basic human right. Everyone living in America should get the health care they need, regardless of their employment status or ability to pay. Even during this terrible crisis, Donald Trump and Republican politicians are trying to take away millions of people's health insurance. With the existential threat of another 4 years of this president, we all have a profound obligation to act. Not only to vote, but to make sure that our friends, family, and neighbors vote as well. We must elect Joe Biden. Each of us must be a hero for our communities, for our country, and then, with a compassionate and intelligent president, we must act together and put on his desk a bill that guarantees us all the health care we deserve. Text VOTE to 30330 to learn how to vote safely, because our lives depend on it.
Audie Barkin, I can't imagine anyone who could deliver that message with more impact than him.
Yeah, Democrats are looking to put a human face and voice to what is needed in this country as far as healthcare reform is concerned. So that obviously is good. They're hoping to pack a powerful emotional punch tonight.
Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, a key focus of tonight's convention is also national security. It will begin with a speech from the party's 2004 standard bearer, a Vietnam veteran, former senator, U.S. U.S. Secretary of State under President Obama, John Kerry.
And then Kerry will be followed by another former Secretary of State, a four-star general, a Republican who served 3 Republican presidents, Colin Powell, who later voted for President Obama and candidate Clinton. Let's turn to Andrea Mitchell, who has followed Colin Powell's career for years, and Jeremy Bash, who served as President Obama's chief of staff at the CIA and at the Defense Department. And just, Andrea, briefly, the significance for Colin Powell to actually address a Democratic convention. As mentioned, he has voted Democratic in the last few elections, but this takes it another step.
And he sees this as a real issue of leadership. He is a general first, Secretary of State and diplomat second, but he really is a military man and also the child of immigrants. And he sees that Donald Trump does not meet the leadership needs of this country, and he is that forcefully compelled to speak out for Joe Biden as a former Republican speaking at the Democratic National Convention. It's the first time he's done this, and it's pretty remarkable.
And Jeremy Bash, when you look at Joe Biden, how would he, in the 30 seconds we have before we hear from them, how would he use the military?
Well, I think he would do so to defend America's core national security interests, Lester. And I think the Biden team likes this contrast because Biden is experienced, he is steady, and Trump has been erratic on the national stage.
All right, Jeremy, thanks. We are going to now hear from this group of speakers on national security.
Hi, I'm John Kerry. For the 8 years of the Obama-Biden administration, we led by example. We eliminated the threat of an Iran with a nuclear weapon. We built a 68-nation coalition to destroy ISIS. We forged a 195-nation agreement to attack climate change. We stopped Ebola before it became a pandemic. Donald Trump inherited a growing economy and a more peaceful world. And like everything else he inherited, he bankrupted it. When this president goes overseas, it isn't a goodwill mission, it's a blooper reel. He breaks up with our allies and writes love letters to dictators. America deserves a president who is looked up to, not laughed at. Donald Trump pretends Russia didn't attack our elections, and now he does nothing about Russia putting a bounty on our troops. So he won't defend our country. He doesn't know how to defend our troops. The only person he's interested in defending is himself. This is the bottom line. Our interests, our ideals, and our brave men and women in uniform can't afford 4 more years of Donald Trump. Our troops can't get out of harm's way by hiding in the White House bunker. They need a president who will stand up for them, and President Biden will. Joe's moral compass has always pointed in the right direction, from the fight to break the back of apartheid to the struggle to wake up the world to genocide in the Balkans. Joe understands that none of the issues of this world, not nuclear weapons, not the challenge of building back better after COVID, not terrorism, and certainly not the climate crisis, none can be resolved without bringing nations together with strength and humility. Joe understands our values don't limit our power, they magnify it. He knows you can't spread democracy around the world if you don't practice it at home. And he knows that even the United States of America needs friends on this planet. Before Donald Trump, we used to talk about American exceptionalism. The only thing exceptional about the incoherent Trump foreign policy is that it has made our nation more isolated than ever before. Joe Biden knows we aren't exceptional because we bluster that we are. We are exceptional because we do exceptional things. On June 6, 1944, young Americans gave their lives on the beaches of Normandy to liberate the world from tyranny. Out of the ashes of that war, we made peace and rebuilt the world. That was and remains exceptional. It is the opposite of everything Donald Trump stands for. This moment is a fight for the security of America and the world. Only Joe Biden can make America lead like America again. If you agree, text JOIN to 30330. Thank you.
In the Situation Room, presidents make decisions of war and peace. So when Joe Biden walks into the Situation Room, first and foremost in his mind is, how will my decision impact the lives of the American people?
He is experienced. He has made the tough calls.
He's got courage. He's got tremendous courage, character, judgment, and he can be tough. I witnessed it close up.
Joe Biden is decisive and well prepared for any issue.
There's no one more qualified than Joe Biden to be sitting at the head of the table in this Situation Room making decisions for this country.
Having sent his son to war, I don't think anyone can be more ready than Vice President Biden.
He knows exactly what's at stake when he sends our troops overseas.
Biden understands how important it is to have allies standing together with us. They are force multipliers.
Joe Biden has a unique ability to connect with people. He knows the leaders, and he's dealt with them for years, knows what makes them tick.
They trust him, they trust his judgment, and they know that his word is good.
I know that Biden's personal diplomacy will save American lives.
To build these relationships takes decades, and to tear them down, all it takes is a tweet.
Thanks to Donald Trump, our adversaries are stronger and bolder.
Donald Trump has had a love fest with dictators, including China and Russia. He hasn't been standing up to them at all.
I served in the United States Air Force for 36 years. I've led space squadrons, nuclear missile squadrons, and I never thought I would have a president who is a danger to national security.
President Trump has degraded and debased the presidency and our country in the eyes of the world.
The Russians offered bounties on U.S. soldiers. I was shocked when I read that. But the president didn't even ask Vladimir Putin about it. That's un-American.
There's something wrong with that. I mean, that's a dereliction of duty. You're failing the troops. You're failing this country.
The first thing a president needs to do is find out what the facts are. This president doesn't care about facts.
Biden cares about the safety and welfare of American servicemen and women.
Our military had a policy to maintain our presence in Syria. We actually came to the aid of the Kurds against ISIS, and we helped stop the advance. President Trump told us to simply abandon the Kurds. It's shameful.
Joe Biden will be strong against dictators.
I've heard him on the phone with some pretty tough characters. You know, you talk about Joe Biden's empathy, his decency, but Joe Biden is tough as nails, and everybody knows it.
He will do the right thing, no matter the political cost.
I've served for 2 Republican presidents and 1 Democratic president. I have seen the Trump administration make decisions without any thought, without any preparation, that have massive life and death consequences.
At one of the most defining times in the history of the world, Joe Biden is uniquely qualified to be president of the United States.
If you want a strong America, you want Joe Biden.
Hi, I'm former Secretary of State Colin Powell. 100 years ago, a young immigrant left a dirt farm in Jamaica and set out for America. 3 years later, a ship pulled into New York Harbor, and a young Jamaican woman gazed up at the Statue of Liberty for the first time. They became my parents, and they inspired me to finish college and join the Army. This began a journey of service that would take me from basic training to combat in Vietnam, up the ranks to serve as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Secretary of State. The values I learned growing up in the South Bronx and serving in uniform were the same values that Joe Biden's parents instilled in him in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I support Joe Biden for the presidency of the United States because those values still define him, and we need to restore those values to the White House. Our country needs a commander-in-chief who takes care of our troops in the same way he would his own family. For Joe Biden, that doesn't need teaching. It comes from the experience he shares with millions of military families, sending his beloved son off to war and praying to God he would come home safe. Joe Biden will be a president we will all be proud to salute. With Joe Biden in the White House, you will never doubt that he will stand with our friends and stand up to our adversaries, never the other way around. He will trust our diplomats and our intelligence community, not the flattery of dictators and despots. He will make it his job to know when anyone dares to threaten us. He will stand up to our adversaries with strength and experience. They will know he means business. I support Joe Biden because beginning on day one, he will restore Americans' leadership and our moral authority. He'll be a president who knows that America is strongest when, as he has said, we lead both by the power of our example and the example of our power. He will restore America's leadership in the world and restore the alliances we need to address the dangers that threaten our nation. from climate change to nuclear proliferation. Today, we are a country divided, and we have a president doing everything in his power to make it that way and keep us that way. What a difference it will make to have a president who unites us, who restores our strength and our soul. I still believe that in our hearts, we are the same America that brought my parents to our shores, an America that inspires freedom around the world. That's the America Joe Biden will lead as our next president. Thank you very much.
It was a friendship that shouldn't have worked. John, a former Navy pilot just released from a North Vietnamese prison. Joe, a young senator from Delaware.
Legislative assistance.
But in the 1970s, Joe was assigned a military aide for a trip overseas.
I was the Navy's Senate liaison and used to carry your bags on overseas trips.
The son of a gun never carried my bags. He was supposed to carry my bags, David, but he never carried my bags.
John and Joe traveled thousands of miles together. The families got to know each other, gathering for picnics in the Bidens' backyard.
They would just sit and joke. It was like a comedy show sometimes to watch the two of them.
But when John was elected to the Senate as a Republican from Arizona, they found themselves on opposing sides.
We're in different parties. We hold different views on many issues.
They'd be going at it on the floor, and you'd think, oh, these guys must really, really, really dislike each other. And they'd be having dinner that night together.
Senator Biden had great respect for the institution of the Senate. He built relationships that were cordial, that were personal.
We've always been willing, when we thought the other guy was right, cross the aisle and lock arms. It's good for the country.
It takes trust to get things done in a divided government. And I think with Joe Biden, his colleagues knew that your points were equally valid to him.
Even if a deal seemed out of reach, it was always Joe who tried to cross the aisle.
He was like a natural for that. He just had an ability to find the common ground, but never give up your principles.
For 3 decades, Joe was able to move his colleagues and find a way forward. On violence against women, banning chemical weapons, assault weapons, and controlling nuclear arms.
It was a style of legislating and leadership that you don't find much anymore.
And when millions of Americans were faced with losing their health insurance, it was Joe's friend who saved Obamacare by crossing the aisle.
McCain casts his vote with a thumbs down.
John and I have been given several awards about bipartisanship. We don't understand why you should get an award for bipartisanship.
Thank you for your example. I'm proud to remain the same good guy that you were when you first got here. Most of all, for your friendship. My life and the lives of many have been enriched by it.
We've been watching a video montage narrated by Cindy McCain, the widow of U.S. Senator John McCain, a Republican. And for the second night, Lester, we're seeing some Republican voices really getting prime time at the Democratic National Convention. We await Dr. Jill Biden's speech in a minute, but let's go to a former top advisor to President Obama who ran his campaigns, David Plouffe. It's an interesting moment in the Democratic Party. On the one hand, David, we see how it's reaching out to shore up its left flank, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and now this section of the convention with former General Colin Powell and this tribute with John McCain. Can the Democrats be all things to all people?
Well, you have to do both. You're going to need great turnout, particularly in a pandemic where voting is more challenging. And Joe Biden's doing extremely well right now with seniors, with suburban voters. And I think voices like Cindy McCain and Colin Powell are helpful. By the way, Arizona could determine who our next president is. So Cindy McCain's voice takes on extra meaning there.
Yeah, let me turn back to Jeremy Bash. Jeremy, I just want to get your thoughts on that montage there and building up Joe Biden as this man of leadership. Do we know, you know, he talked about being the last advisor in the room with President Obama during big decisions. Do we know what kind of advice or what kind of influence he wielded on national security issues?
Oh, in the Situation Room, Lester. He sat at the president's right hand. He was in the room for every single large decision, the drawdown in Iraq, the buildup in Afghanistan and the drawdown, the effort to take down Osama bin Laden, the effort to go after Iran's nuclear program. Joe Biden was in all of those discussions. When he raises his right hand, Lester, and takes the oath, he will be the most prepared person ever to assume the presidency. And that's, again, why I think the Biden team likes this contrast, because Trump has been so erratic. He's been so cozying up to dictators like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. And Joe Biden will make our adversaries very nervous, and our allies, I think, will breathe a sigh of relief.
All right, let's turn to Andrea Mitchell, who, of course, covers foreign policy. National security Republicans, are they a group that could vote for Joe Biden? Is this a fertile territory for the Democrats to be mining?
I think so, because they have come out in large numbers. You've seen a hollowing out at the State Department and in the intelligence community. The president has taken on all of these agencies. His Secretary of State has really gotten rid of all these assistant secretaries. I've seen all of these people. I've worked with them for years in different administrations. They're not partisans, but I could very much see the national security, the military people following Joe Biden. And even today, we have the news today out of the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee, which goes far beyond the Mueller report, indicating that the former Trump 2016 campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was actually closely aligned with a known Russian intelligence officer who became his business partner and may very well, according to this report, signed by Republicans and Democrats, well have known about the hacking in 2016, and that the hacking actually was directed by Vladimir Putin. That's something the Mueller report never even said, and that came out today from a committee led by Marco Rubio.
I want to go to Kristen Welker right now. Kristen, I'd like to get a preview of what we think we're going to hear from Jill Biden. But before we do that, I understand you've got a little intelligence on what we're going to hear from President Obama tomorrow night.
That's right. I think it's going to be a big moment, Lester. Tomorrow night, I think, will be the first night when we really start to see the argument coming together for the Biden-Harris ticket as a whole. I am told that former President Obama is going to talk about why the ticket is the right one to lead the country through this economic crisis and this health crisis. And then an aide close to Obama tells me that he is going to talk about seeing Biden's leadership firsthand. Part of what Jeremy was just talking about, but the ways in which they work together to recover the economy when it was in a deep recession, to pass health care, and to navigate all of those very complicated foreign policy issues. And then I am told that former President Obama is going to cast this as a fight for our very democracy itself, and to reiterate something that we heard from the former First Lady, which is the need to get out and vote. And then we will, of course, hear from Senator Kamala Harris tomorrow evening, and she will reintroduce herself to the country, essentially talk about her background as a former prosecutor, as the former Attorney General of California, and then, of course, the title that means the most to her, Mamala. And then, of course, it all culminates on Thursday night with that big speech by Joe Biden when he accepts his party's nomination and, again, cast this as a fight for the very soul of the nation. Lester, Savannah.
All right, Kristen, but tonight belongs to Jill Biden, who in just a few moments will be addressing the convention about her husband of 43 years. Now, watching this convention is President Trump. He's been pretty vocal about it, who he's seen, what he thinks of the speaker. He's on the road tonight doing some counter-programming. Let's go to NBC's Hallie Jackson, our White House correspondent, returning to duty one baby later. Welcome back from maternity leave, Hallie. And the president has certainly been paying attention to what's been going on these last couple nights.
No kidding, Savannah, and thank you for the warm welcome back. Yeah, I got off the phone with a senior administration official who said, of course, the president is absolutely engaged in what is happening with this Democratic convention. But here's the thing about President Trump, Savannah, as you well know, and as we've talked about for a number of years, you can call a million sources, but the president ends up just tweeting it. And that is what we have seen tonight. The president not just counter-programming, but counter-punching as well. He's defending himself in a series of retweets and some tweets as well against the Democratic attacks, particularly as it relates, at least tonight, to the coronavirus. It follows what we saw from the president earlier today, where he slammed night one's headline speaker, and that is former First Lady Michelle Obama, accusing her of making what he described as a divisive speech for the American people. The president has been traveling as part of this counter-programming effort on his own kind of campaign swing. He was just in Arizona, a place that will be absolutely critical for both Joe Biden and Donald Trump coming up this fall. He is now heading back to the White House, Savannah, and I expect that we're going to hear more from the president in the hours to come.
All right, Hallie, thank you.
And we are moments away from hearing Jill Biden. You've met her. She doesn't come across as a person that embraces politics per se.
No, but she's a very experienced veteran political wife, her husband having been elected to the U.S. Senate in the 70s. Of course, she married him a few years after that. And that personal story and how she came in. And as Beau Biden, the late Beau Biden once said, his mom rebuilt that family just as much as his dad after the death of Joe Biden's first wife, Nelia. So we're going to hear from Dr. Jill Biden. She's going to be speaking, actually, Lester, from high school. We call her Dr. Jill Biden. She's not a medical doctor. She's has her doctorate in education.
She was a community college professor.
Yes, and stayed doing that all through her time at the White House when she was second lady. And so that's the place she's chosen to make her address tonight.
Let's go quickly while we're waiting for her to begin. Let's go back to Chuck Todd. Chuck, is she anxious to get back? Well, obviously she's somewhat anxious, but to get back into this game?
Well, you know, what's interesting is that she's been, in some ways, you've heard this about Joe Biden, much more involved in this campaign, not as if she was involved in previous campaigns, but this one a lot more involved, whether it was in the running mate process or in some of the strategic decisions. She's been a much bigger player this time in this campaign than she has in previous ones.
All right, we're about 15 seconds away from the former second lady who hopes to become the first lady of the United States, again speaking from that school in Wilmington, and to tell a little bit of their story together and to kind of set the stage for a night in which it was about leadership and about promoting this idea of Joe Biden as a guy who is ready on day one.
Perhaps there's no better character witness than someone who's spent 4 decades with him. So let's listen as Dr. Jill Biden addresses the convention.
I have always loved the sounds of a classroom, the quiet that sparks with possibility just before students shuffle in. The murmur of ideas bouncing back and forth as we explore the world together. The laughter and tiny moments of surprise you find in materials you've taught 1,000,000 times. When I taught English here at Brandywine High School, I would spend my summer preparing for the school year about to start, filled with anticipation. But this quiet is heavy. You can hear the anxiety that echoes down empty hallways. There's no scent of new notebooks or freshly waxed floors. The room them are now confined to boxes on a computer screen. I hear it from so many of you. The frustration of parents juggling work while they support their children's learning, or are afraid that their kids might get sick from school. The concern of every person working without enough protection. The despair in the lines that stretch out before food banks. And the indescribable sorrow that follows every lonely last breath when the ventilators turn off. As a mother and a grandmother, as an American, I am heartbroken by the magnitude of this loss, by the failure to protect our communities, by every precious and irreplaceable life gone. Like so many of you, I'm left asking, how do I keep my family safe? You know, motherhood came to me in a way I never expected. I fell in love with a man and 2 little boys standing in the wreckage of unthinkable loss, mourning a wife and mother, a daughter and sister. I never imagined at the age of 26 I would be asking myself, how do you make a broken family whole? Still, Joe always told the boys, Mommy sent Jill to us. And how could I argue with her? And so we figured it out together. in those big moments that would go by too fast, Thanksgivings and state championships, birthdays and weddings, in the mundane ones that we didn't even know were shaping our lives, reading stories piled on the couch, rowdy Sunday dinners and silly arguments, listening to the faint sounds of laughter that would float downstairs as Joe put the kids to bed every night, while I studied for grad school or graded papers under the pale yellow kitchen lamp, the dinner dishes waiting in the sink. We found that love holds a family together. Love makes us flexible and resilient. It allows us to become more than ourselves together. And though it can't protect us from the sorrows of life, it gives us refuge, a home. How do you make a broken family whole? The same way you make a nation whole. With love and understanding, and with small acts of kindness, with bravery, with unwavering faith. You show up for each other in big ways and small ones, again and again. It's what so many of you are doing right now for your loved ones, for complete strangers, for your communities. There are those who want to tell us that our country is hopelessly divided, that our differences are irreconcilable. But that's not what I've seen over these last few months. We're coming together and holding on to each other. We're finding mercy and grace in the moments we might have once taken for granted. We're seeing that our differences are precious and our similarities infinite. We have shown that the heart of this nation still beats with kindness and courage. That's the soul of America Joe Biden is fighting for now. After our son Beau died of cancer, I wondered if I would ever smile or feel joy again. It was summer, but there was no warmth left for me. 4 days after Beau's funeral, I watched Joe shave and put on his suit. I saw him steel himself in the mirror, take a breath, put his shoulders back, and walk out into a world empty of our son. He went back to work. That's just who he is. There are times when I couldn't even imagine how he did it, how he put one foot in front of the other and kept going. But I've always understood why he did it. For the daughter who convinces her mom to finally get a breast cancer screening and misses work to drive her to the clinic. For the community college student who has faced homelessness and survived abuse, but finds the grit to finish her degree and make a good life for her kids. For the little boy whose mom is serving as a Marine in Iraq, who puts on a brave face in his video call and doesn't complain when the only thing he wants for his birthday is to be with her. For all those people Joe gives his personal phone number to at rope lines and events, the ones he talks to for hours after dinner, helping them smile through their loss, letting them know that they aren't alone. He does it for you. Joe's purpose has always driven him forward. His strength of will is unstoppable, and his faith is unshakable. Because it's not in politicians or political parties or even in himself. It's in the providence of God. His faith is in you, in us. Yes, so many classrooms are quiet right now. The playgrounds are still. But if you listen closely, you can hear the sparks of change in the air. Across this country, educators, parents, first responders, Americans of all walks of life are putting their shoulders back, fighting for each other. We haven't given up. We just need leadership worthy of our nation, worthy of you, honest leadership to bring us back together, to recover from this pandemic and prepare for whatever else is next. Leadership to reimagine what our nation will be. That's Joe. He and Kamala will work as hard as you do every day to make this nation better. And if I have the honor of serving as your First Lady, I will too. And with Joe as president, these classrooms will ring out with laughter and possibility once again. The burdens we carry are heavy, and we need someone with strong shoulders. I know that if we entrust this nation to Joe, he will do for your family what he did for ours. Bring us together and make us whole. Carry us forward in our time of need. Keep the promise of America for all of us.
Great job. God, I love it. How are you? Hey, everyone. I'm Joe Biden's husband. As you heard tonight, excuse me, you can see why she's the love of my life, the rock of our family. She never gives herself much credit, but the truth is she's the strongest person I know. She's a backbone like a ramrod. She loves fiercely, cares deeply. Nothing stops her when she sets her mind to getting something right. And you know, for all of you out there across the country, just think of your favorite educator who gave you the confidence to believe in yourself. That's the kind of First Lady this Jill Biden will be. God love you.
So go to joebiden.com to join our campaign.
Thank you all for watching. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Joe Biden had only a few words to say to accept the nomination tonight.
But, some of them 3 times, lady.
But plenty of words there to congratulate his wife, Jill Biden, on her remarks, very deeply personal remarks about their journey together.
Yeah, she was a character witness and told about the heartbreak that their family had been through, not once, but twice, and talked about it and then made that a metaphor for what she says the country is going through and how you put a country back together. So Dr. Jill Biden making her address to the convention tonight. Cameo from her husband, Joe Biden, the nominee, who will make his speech, of course, Thursday night.
And a quick break now. We'll be back with some final thoughts and a look ahead to tomorrow night when we continue here on NBC.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job?
That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
A surge in coronavirus infection. New developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
A country reeling from a pandemic and racial injustice. The story changes hourly.
The president's push to get children back into school is sinking in among families who are debating the safety of it.
It's the 11th hour.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
In the few seconds left, that's a wrap for night 2 of the Democratic National Convention. Let's go to Chuck Todd. What's your take?
Look, tonight we were saying, is this going to be the night they make the case for Joe Biden? Today was, I'm going to use your word, Savannah. She was a character witness, Joe Biden was. So was Chuck Hagel, Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John McCain, late, on film there. I think they did what they wanted to do, which is put some character meat on Joe Biden.
His appearances tonight, how did they go over?
I think those are just like, in some ways, what you'd expect, right? Enough to sort of tease and be a presence, but not enough to take away from Thursday night.
All right, Chuck, well, we will see you tomorrow night. That's going to do it for day 2 of this convention, like never before. It's come to an end. Tomorrow night, Democrats ratify Joe Biden's choice of Kamala Harris as his running mate, and she has her big moment with a primetime speech. And we'll hear from the man who chose Biden as his vice president, former President Barack Obama. And then on Thursday night, the Democratic nominee for president, Joe Biden.
We're going to be here every night covering it. And join me tomorrow, bright and early. Today's show, we've got a live interview, actually, with tonight's headliner, Dr. Jill Biden. Lester and I will see you right back here tomorrow night. Until then, for Chuck, Andrea, and all of us at NBC News, thank you for joining us tonight. We're glad you're with us. Good night.